What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fresh Podcast, where we bring you everything fresh in entertainment. I am your host, Robert, who is in fact not Drew Brumfield, but today we are joined with Drew Brumfield. Introduce yourself.
What is going on? No, I'm not going to do the same intro. Thought about it. Yes, it is me being a guest this time, not being a host, and I am doing fantastic. Thank you, Robert.
All right, good to hear, good to hear. And last but certainly not least, we have our other host, Seth.
Hello.
All right, and today we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy 16. So, this is a game that I've personally been pretty excited about ever since it was announced, but Seth and Drew here don't have the same experience that I do with 16, so I'm very interested to see their perspectives as we go through this discussion tonight.
Yeah.
So to kind of establish the background, I've been with the Final Fantasy series for a few years now, starting with like Final Fantasy X, jumping all over the place. So I have a bit of a seniority, if you will, with the series.
Yeah.
But Seth here, this is actually his first Final Fantasy game, so that's pretty exciting to see more people getting into the games. And then Drew here, watched a playthrough, but I'll count it.
It's I
We'll take
I
those.
did not own a system to play the game, in my defense. Or else I would have. But it seemed interesting enough, and from what I know about like the Final Fantasy series, I didn't need to like, even though this has the number 16 behind it, which is sure intimidating for some people. You can start with which any one you want. It's like the Persona series. They're all like their own story, like all the numbered ones. So I was
Yeah,
like,
speaking
this one's
of which, Drew,
yeah.
this is actually an ambush. This is not a Final Fantasy podcast. This is actually a Persona podcast. We just need you to give control over to like Robert for just a few seconds. So surprise!
All right, so yeah, we're gonna talk about.
We're gonna be talking about Persona,
Alright, so
3 through
Persona
5.
5, one of the best RPGs ever.
Well, I'm gonna be very quiet then. In this podcast, I have yet to.
Not
That was
pictured
on the
us
list. I was on the list after Mass Effect 3, which I am still playing through right now. So this is just gonna be a very much a two-person podcast right now.
Yeah, so not pictured as us tying Drew to a chair with an Xbox controller, and he's not getting up until he beats that game. So he's gonna be there for a couple weeks, but
Yeah.
don't worry about that.
Yeah, if we could get Drew you to watch like a playthrough, it probably wouldn't be too bad to work with that either. The only problem is I don't know of many playthroughs out there where you can watch the whole thing and not have it like get struck down by Atlas.
Mhm.
Oh, is Persona playthroughs like super like restricted or something, or
They have like some weird streaming guidelines where they don't want you showing footage past like a certain point in the game.
oh,
They
You
kind
have
of
to get
lax
like
a
a
bit with
proof.
those over time, but yeah.
Yeah,
interesting.
and we've seen like some streamers where they can reach out ahead of time and kind of like it's annoying, but they basically have to reach out ahead of time with Atlas and trying to get the A-OK from them to do it. But yeah,
Huh.
it's weird. You don't run into that
But-
issue with Final Fantasy though.
No, you
Yeah,
don't. No.
So Square is generally a little more lax about the streaming stuff. They were pretty open with people having like pre-release footage and whatnot of Final Fantasy 16. But unfortunately, this won't be Persona for all five of you that want Persona on this podcast. But instead, we will be talking about 16. So, to start us off, what kind of made you guys interested in this game compared to like other Final Fantasy games? Like what about this one spoke to you guys more?
Seth, do you want to go first, or you want me to?
Yeah, I could go first. So this began like for me personally, it began a few years ago during this like Italian Senate thing where they were like all together just talking about stuff. And then like and then for a brief moment the Italian Senate got hacked and they were just showing full on Tifa porn from Final Fantasy VII.
What the
And that's
fuck?
what really ignited my interest in
What in God's name are you talking about?
it's a Final Fantasy. So no, in all seriousness, I guess my interest it didn't start with the initial trailer, where they were showing the more action oriented thing. Although that is kind of like my jam. Uh, I guess it really kind of came down to around the time earlier this year when they were getting that first big preview event, where they were getting a lot of press to come check it out. I listened a lot to Kind of Funny, and Michael Hyam, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. He does some stuff with Kind of Funny, but he mostly works with GameSpot. But he actually went on their Gamescast podcast and was talking about Final Fantasy 16, what he played, and Michael is a diehard like 14 fan. So he had good things to say about that preview. Also, a couple of things that he was concerned about. But it seemed like there was a lot of interest in Final Fantasy that I hadn't seen since 7 Remake. And granted, I still think 7 Remake has a little bit more to it, but that's just because of nostalgia stuff. I imagine like a lot of old fans were also part of that, not just newcomers who wanted to hop in. But it was that preview event, and then the demo came out, and a lot of people were talking about this demo's great. Oh my god, it's so good. So basically, a lot of word of mouth, and me just within the past few years getting a little bit more interest in JRPGs through Persona made me like, okay, I'll take a crack at 16. So that's kind of what made me pick it up. Is like it was a lot of word of mouth. It especially was confirmed when a lot of reviews were coming in and people were giving this thing like 9s and 10s. I was like, okay, something's crazy going on here. I need to check this out for myself. So yeah, admittedly for me, the media machine for Square Enix worked on me. I just saw a bunch of stuff for it, and I was like, hey, a lot of people are saying some cool things about it. I'll give it a shot. So that's kind of the reason why I'm here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Similar story with me is we've referenced this before, but like one of my favorite YouTubers is Maximilian Dude. And his favorite game is Final Fantasy 7, and he's talked about it all the time, and I watched him play the remake. And I remember when this game was coming out, it was like, oh, it's a more action focused like Final Fantasy game, which I'm like, okay, that piques my interest because I'm not a big RPG fan, you know, unless you count like a Pokemon or something. But this is like, you know, it's more action for it's more Devil May Cry style, which I love that. And I kind of watched some gameplay of it, and I was like, okay, I'm actually interested in this. You know, what day is it coming out? Where is it on? And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I forgot. This is a Square Enix game. I can't play this because I don't know the PlayStation 5. Well, I guess I'm going to watch a playthrough of it. Which is unfortunate because this was like the first one where I'm like, okay, no, like after that first like demo and like the first couple hours, I'm like, okay, no, this is like, it has a really strong start. It has a really strong start with the story. It has a, you know, cool system with its powers. And I'm like, this actually seems like what I would want, like the scale of a Final Fantasy, but like the actual combat of like a Devil May Cry or something. We'll get into like the whole, like the game as a whole in the future, but like initial, like just watching like initial gameplay and stuff and just like seeing that, I was like, okay, no, this seems like something different and something I would actually be like, I could actually play and get through. Because like the number one thing for me in games is always and will forever be like movement and combat. Is the game period fun to play? Story will always be second. Story characters will always be second.
Yeah, you know, to echo Drew's point here, I think that's another thing that I forgot to mention is it really was the shift over to action. Not for me personally as well, not just because like, oh, I really want to play like, you know, like not that it gets turn-based systems. I'm actually kind of a little bit more interested in those now. But yeah, like I think that's the reason why I jumped into it too, is just like, oh, more DMC style combat. DMC is one of my favorite action games of all time, and one of the I believe the directors behind this worked on those games. So it's like, okay, cool, it's worth checking out then.
Yeah,
it worked. Like if Square Enix's job was to make sure Final Fantasy had a much broader audience than what it's used to, I think they've kind of achieved that goal.
I'm pretty sure that was actually the exact goal with this, because I remember like seeing interviews where it was like the entire point of this Final Fantasy was to appeal to a Western audience, which is why it's more action focused and why like characters are the way that they are.
Yeah, an interesting tidbit too is that they actually recorded the English dialogue first and then dubbed it into Japanese,
Mm,
which usually it's the other way around to kind of emphasize like, hey, we want this to do well in the West. Because
yeah.
typically Final Fantasy is, obviously a Japanese franchise, so it's going to do better in Japan than it would in North America.
That makes a lot of
Um,
sense,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. So like as for myself, for my interest in this game, I was already interested just because I'm already a fan of the series. And then as I started to learn more about the development, like it was being headed by Creative Business Unit 3, which is the Final Fantasy 14 team. And as the fanboy of that game I am, of course I'm going to be excited about it. It's directed by Yoshi P, who has miraculously turned 14 from a failure into one of the best MMOs ever made. So that's pretty awesome. The
Mhm.
soundtrack is done by Masayoshi Soken. I think I mispronounced something, but he does phenomenal work on 14 soundtrack. He started having more and more development in the soundtrack, starting from, I believe, Stormblood. But Shadowbringers and Endwalkers, when he really hit his stride with like his kind of take on the soundtrack. So I was really excited to see what he would come up with because almost everything he's composed for 14 I think is awesome.
Mhm.
Especially a lot of the boss themes. So I was eagerly anticipating those, and spoiler, I was not disappointed with that. And as Seth and Drew alluded to, yeah, the combat director for Devil May Cry 5 actually, directed the combat for 16. And since DMC5 is also one of the best character action games ever made, I feel like this was a match made in heaven personally. So I was just really excited. And from watching some of the trailers where they showed like gameplay bits, I thought this was going to be a really fun game. From just seeing like the icon fights having like a lot of mechanics and moves like I saw in 14, and then even from like moves they did in like previous games like Bahamut casting like freaking Mega Flare and all that. It was really cool to get to see that in like a single player game and not doing it in
Yeah.
like a 14 raid.
Yeah.
So I was pretty excited about it. So I was definitely going to be like, this is a day one buy for me.
Mhm.
So I think it turned out pretty good. But that's enough about our what made us interested. Now, let's see how each of us feels about the game after it came out because when the game came out first, there was a lot of really initial great impressions. And I feel like as time gone on and people kind of got further into the game, people started to have more like complaints about it. I know I've definitely had my complaints, but see, Drew, I want to start with you. From just
Yeah.
watching Max's playthrough, what kind of have you noticed, like good or bad or whatever about the
So
game?
I'll like I said earlier, it has a really strong start. It has a good start where like it grabs your attention. It has like big cinematic fight where like okay, you're invested in the characters. It even starts off on like a relatively like dark note with like a kind of younger character quote unquote dying. Um get onto that later. But like towards the middle, it definitely drops off like kind of hard. Like specifically, there's a moment where like, um, what's his name? The guy that's Titan, like the guy
Hugo.
that's his
Hugo
Hugo.
Kuka.
Yeah, Hugo wasn't the best character, and you're with him in a while, and then it goes from like Hugo to this desert area, and from like that middle section of the game was really got really bored. I was on my phone during a lot of that portion.
It was also
And like
really rough on my performance too.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, yeah.
Well, I'm not even just talking about like the fight. I just mean like that whole section, like the whole desert section after that fight. And then even after, like, well after that, you're just kind of meandering about.
Yeah, that
And
little
then,
shitty town, like my brain's
yeah.
tanked. I'm sorry, but like
Yeah.
that's more what I'm talking about. I don't know why, but like it's such a small town, so I don't know why that part specifically gave me so much issues with my frame rate.
Even the game doesn't want to render. It's just that boring. And then but here's the thing, it then picks up a little bit when you get to the Bahamut fight and like that person. And then the ending's kind of okay. But it's a weird up and down for me where it's like I really like the opening. I think it's good. And then it starts going down, down, downhill, downhill, and then it kind of like plateaus, and then it shoots and peaks again, and then it
Mhm.
starts going down again. So it's a lot of ups and downs. Um, and there's other complaints I have with it too, and this is as someone that watching the gameplay, so maybe I could be wrong, but it seems like that the gameplay is really cool at the start, but gets kind of it almost seems like it gets samey unless like you start forcing yourself to use some of the other powers, because a lot of the powers seem kind of like a little too good, a little too overpowered, which is
Yeah.
fine
I
in an
can
Um,
definitely
action
agree.
game, but like since you can't raise the difficulty until you finish the entire game, and it's a good long game, it's like that's a normal thing in action games, but like the fact that this is like a multiple hour thing seems like it's like game gets a little too easy at points, and like you almost have to challenge yourself. Like that's what Max was doing in his playthrough. He started using the weird like kind of side powers just to do something different and make it interesting, and also just like have a little bit of a challenge. um so that's kind of like general thoughts for me. I still think, from watching it, I still think the game's good. um I'll get into like the story stuff later, because I think that's a different question, but
Correct.
I think it's solid. But it definitely has a lot of moments, like definitely a lot of ups and down moments, like high highs and low lows.
Yeah. So I can definitely piggyback off of some of your points, like the
Mm-hmm.
performance. I played the game in performance mode, so when you're not in battles, that thing goes all over the place. Especially some of like the later game areas, like the desert, or even like the field right before the end of the game. Um, my frame rate was like below 30, I'm pretty sure. Like it felt all over the place. But the thing is, like in the fights, generally the game would hold closer to 60. I was actually watching the Digital Foundry video earlier, and they talked about how what they do is that they lower the resolution of things in combat since you're going to be busy killing things. You're not going to notice the graphics kind of lowering. So that's kind of how they do like performance saving. Um, but in graphic mode, I believe it's a lot more stable, but it's an action game. I don't want to play anywhere below 60 if I can help it.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, I have to definitely echo that point as well. Like and I think it's something that it's only fair that we talk about it here because we talked about it. I know Robert, you weren't part of that conversation, but the Jedi Survivor also is that was a big point we also hammered home. Is like, hey, this performance is very inconsistent. It's not good, and it's kind of a shame that we're seeing it also here as well. Granted, I will give them one up on this, at least as you mentioned. I think Robert, the quality modes does seem to stay at like a consistent 30 frames, and it is a very pretty game just from the technical aspect of it. But yeah, I think it's disappointing. I never really felt like I was ever at a consistent 60 when I played on performance. That's my preferred way to do it. Is I'd rather take some form of frames above 30 than none at all, you know.
you're
Um
right.
so no, I definitely agree with you on those points.
Yeah. And then also with the combat, I can agree. I think the combat's really fun. It's really satisfying. There's a lot of really creative things you can do to kind of mix and match abilities to suit whatever playstyle you want. But my problem being that it's a game where you can easily just find a build you really like and just stick with it for the rest of the game and not vary it up because it works.
Yeah.
So it definitely can become like a you kind of need to make your own fun with the abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're constantly getting new icon abilities throughout the game. You're getting new stuff up till just about the end of the game. So there's almost always going to be something that you can play with. And something that I really like about the gameplay is that you're not locked into abilities once you unlock them. At any point you can refund your ability points if you want to try out different abilities and to see like, oh, okay, I just got, Shiva's abilities. I
Yeah.
want to see what she can do, but oh, I don't really like it. All right, let me go back and get like Titan's abilities. Like you don't have to grind up points to invest in Titan. You can just go, oh, I don't really like Shiva stuff. I'm gonna go put everything I put into Shiva back into Titan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're
I
always
really like.
free to jump around.
Yeah, I did appreciate that, especially for like an action game where it's kind of like you might feel a bit discouraged to like try out a new build or something like that, and here it's just kind of like, oh, there's all kinds of like neat little things that I can do. I think one thing though you said is you're constantly getting new things in this game. I think that's a point I am gonna have to disagree with you quickly on, Robert.
Mm.
Because I think it gets at the core of like I think one of the issues with the combat in this game is take a Devil May Cry, for example. DMC5. You're either spending red orbs to learn new moves, or the game and the story is giving you something new. Nero is getting a new kind of arm. Dante is getting some form of new weapon to play around with. And it's happening like every level or every other level. It feels great and always feels like you're getting something new to experiment with. It works in Devil May Cry 5 because that game is like, it'll probably take you about 10 hours to complete the story.
If that.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's on
But
the first playthrough.
yeah, like maybe about 10 to 12 hours to beat it. But Final Fantasy 16, this is at the end. By the time I finished it, it was like well over 50 hours. 50 hours, and I felt like I was getting about the same, if not less, than the same kind of arsenal that you get in DMC5. And it feels like it is spread out very thin. So it's a drought
Yeah.
of content, basically. Not to mention, it's only really in the main story missions where you unlock new things and new moves. So, like, if you're like me, where you're doing some of the side content, like the hunts and all that, basically there's big gaps where I'm not doing the main story. So in between the main stories, which is long enough as is, I'm doing the side missions, and I'm not getting new moves or anything from it, man. It's it's that's where I feel like the problem is like the game's combat is good, but it's not quite to the depth of say a DMC5, and it's pacing it out at like a length that action games don't do that. Like that's why action games take like 6 hours to beat because they're trying to like give you something new every 30 minutes, basically.
Yeah, they're trying to keep your attention the entire time. And also, most action games are designed with the idea of multiple playthroughs of like, okay, we'll go through once, you get everything, you learn all the stuff. Now you got to play through at least one more time to be like, okay, now what can I do with everything? And the problem with a Final Fantasy game is like, I'm sure people do it, but it's like once you finish one playthrough, you don't want to turn around and be like, oh well, let me do another 50-hour playthrough. Like it's a like Final Fantasy games seem like it's like a really big commitment to like start and like complete one of these, and it's one of the reasons that's like it's held me off from the series because I'm like I don't want to I don't have like all time to just sit down and just be grinding like side quests and then doing this and then going to the main quest. But yeah,
Yeah,
it seems like it wants to have the pacing of an action game, but the runtime of a Final Fantasy.
Yeah, so this is something I both kind of like and dislike about 16 is that it definitely wants to be more of an action game while still having the RPG elements. They tried to do something similar with 15 because that was also marketed as a when you boot up the game, a Final Fantasy game for newcomers and old fans alike or something along those lines. Like 15 was very much the same kind of premise of let's expand our audience, let's kind of move away from the turn-based games, kind of more into like an action game because that tends to bring in a wider audience. Um, so that definitely kind of goes into 16, and there's still a lot of RPG elements in 16, but things like levels and whatnot, I kind of feel like they don't really matter. Like you level up, you get the same levels every time. Clive always gets like 3 attack, 50 HP, so on and so forth. So a lot of the level ups kind of feel inconsequential after a point. Like, yeah, if you're struggling in a fight, maybe leveling up a couple times will help turn things in your favor a bit. But for the most part, I feel like a lot more of what matters is like equipment. And equipment's very easy to come by too. This is another kind of good and bad thing to me is the difficulty. So when you start out the game, you get two difficulty modes. You get more of an action mode and you get more of a story focused mode. because this is something in a lot of interviews they really hit home was they want you to go through the story. They're proud of the story. They want everyone to get to the end if possible. So they designed the game around let's try to funnel people from the start to the finish, which is inherently like it's a good thing to do, but for people more immersed into action games, because it gets a lot of people like Seth, for example, who typically wouldn't play RPGs, but because the gameplay is something he would like, it kind of would bring him in. But then he sees that, oh, I don't get to do as much satisfying things as I can do in like Devil May Cry 5 because the game kind of feels, I wouldn't want to say dumbed down compared to that because again, it's not trying to be Devil May Cry. It's very much still being its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it it makes you want for more, especially like difficulty wise. I feel like the game got really easy once I started to understand the gameplay. I was struggling at first to kind of get used to the game, but again, once combat kind of clicked for me, it really didn't get hard except for very specific fights, which are the bounty fights. Those are the only times I really felt challenged. And from what I understand, the only time you actually do get more challenged is through the unlockable difficulty, which is Final Fantasy mode. However, unlocking that difficulty is behind beating the game. And like Seth mentioned, this is a 50 plus hour game. So if someone's kind of struggling to be like satisfied by the combat, they have to get through a 50-hour game just to then see if this new mode really makes things more engaging for those kind of players.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's a double-edged sword in my opinion because one, it appeals to so many more people, but you also can alienate some of that audience you just brought in because you don't have something that can also accommodate them.
Yeah.
Right.
If we're sticking like going to talking about difficulty now, I do have an observation. You guys can tell me I'm wrong or right. Um, but when I was watching the game, it kind of seems like once you get Bahamut, which is the light element and like all the projectile stuff, it almost seems like the game starts playing itself. Like it was even back saying like, oh, it's getting pretty easy at this point. And then when you got that ability and you could just throw out the like the little spears and hover with your wings to throw the big comet thing, it just seems like okay, yeah, that's really good and just like does the game for you. Like I get that it's supposed to be, I guess, like the zoning, quote unquote, or like ranged
Type
class or
like
ability. Yeah.
yeah, the
But
build. Yeah.
it seems like that is the easiest way to play the game.
I think it'll be different for a lot of different people, but for me personally, the part where it got easy for me was when I unlocked Titan. I told Robert this. I would text him extensively where I would do a very high level hunt that I was not prepared for. Like I'd be like level 35, the target's like 45, so he's like a whole 10 levels over with me. But because of the damn like how good the like Titan block is, I pretty much I basically royal guarded my way through most of the hunts.
Yeah.
I was just kind of the thought process was either I block this or I die. Like there was this there's this no in between. But yeah, like for me, the game got really easy around the time whenever I got the Titan the Titan ability. That was where it got like really easy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I think
But I kind of understand where you're coming from that difficulty, and like I think I think kind of the issue is that like I understand why they did this, you know. Like I get like yes, you want to make sure as many players play this, so you want to basically be like, hey, here's a baseline difficulty where everyone can kind of start off at, you know, action or story mode and no one will feel left out. It's like, okay, I get that. That's understandable. However, my kind of problem is why isn't there just like a basic hard mode? Like it doesn't even have to be Final Fantasy mode like that you unlock at the end, which by the way, when I beat this 50-hour game and I saw that pop, it's like, great, you could jump right into Final Fantasy mode. All I could think of was like, no, thank you. I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready to put another 50 hours in this fucking game. But I think kind of one of the issues with this game, and Robert mentioned, was like the RPG elements and the action elements. Is it not only is it a bit too easy for some more action focused players, like, you know, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but like, we played DMC, we kind of know how these things go. So like, yeah, for a game like this, it's very quick for us to pick up on. And like I said, it's not me trying to brag or anything. And I feel like, me playing this game, it felt like it was missing something with the action. And I think it's because it has its foot in too many areas. It's trying to be an RPG and it's trying to be an action game. Like, let's get a little bit into the RPG elements of it. You level up in this game, but you don't make any choices on how stats are allocated. So it's kind of like, all right, so what's the point? If you don't make those choices, I don't care how many stats it looks like that's going up each time I level up. You might as well not show me anything. Like, it seemed. You go ahead.
So I will interrupt you for a second. Typically, in a lot of JRPGs, you really don't kind of choose your stats. It is kind of random on level up.
Okay. I'm more of a Western
typical.
RPG guy, so that's my thing. I should have known that because I played Persona, and that exact same thing happens there. But it's like, okay, so you're right. You got me on the stat thing about leveling up. But what about like equipment, for example? In this game, there's really, the equipment that you get is your vambraces, your belt, and your sword, and the accessories that you can wear. There's no special perks or anything or special stats tied to any of the vambraces or the swords. It's just literally like, which one has the bigger number? I'm going to use this. It feels like a very linear progression of gear. So you're not really making a choice in how you're outfitting Clive most of the time. You're just kind of picking whatever's the strongest thing. The only time you get to really make a choice kind of like that, where it's like, oh, a certain kind of build, is the accessories that you can wear. You can equip the 3, and there's some really cool ones out there. Not only does the game have some really helpful ones for players who might be struggling, like ones that like slows down time before you get hit, or automatically dodges, or does auto combos. Those are nice for players who need it. But also, like, I remember buying in the shop one of these accessories that each time Clive pulls off like a precision dodge, he like semi primes for a few seconds without spending any meter. It's like, that's really cool. I really think that's a neat perk. It's just, other than that, a lot of them were just kind of like, lower cooldown on this ability. This ability does a little bit more damage. It's kind of like, it's a little boring. And I feel like the RPG elements feel very tacked on here. I'm not really sure that they were needed.
Yeah.
The vision I got.
Oh, sorry.
You go ahead.
I thought that was
I'll get it myself.
Yeah, you're good. I thought that was the end of it. No, but like my kind of view of it, of just like, if this game wasn't called Final Fantasy, then they would have never put RPG elements. They probably would have made it this long either. But if this game was called just like, you know, Clive's Magical Adventure, it wouldn't have sold as well. But also it would have.
I'd buy that game.
I think that game would be great. But like, they would never have put a thing like your stat upgrades or whatever. No, they would have all the things would have been was, it would have just been you gain points like when you level up just to unlock skills and to get the accessories. And there never would have been a thing like, oh, you level up and your stats increase. They would have, like a Devil May Cry or other games, they would have never shown stats. It would have just been this and that. But I think because it has the name Final Fantasy attached to it, they're almost like obligated to make it like, no, it's still kind of an RPG. Like, see, it goes up and like you have an actual level cap. But I think it's because that they're like, they want to stick to like a few elements from like the main genre. But if they won't, I think it would have been better if they just went like full commit action game. Like, the only thing you get when level up is just points to spend on your abilities, and the only thing that like is the shops available is like either new swords or like the gear stuff like Seth was talking about, where it's like, you know, cooldown or the one where it like auto charges your fireball, like stuff like that.
Yeah, I kind of feel that too, and um, I agree that like that's where, and like also like the side quests. I'm not going to get particularly into why the side quests. I almost wish this game didn't have the open world elements too, because you kind of mentioned that as well about this being an RPG. I kind of wish this game was, instead of 50 hours, it was 20 hours, and it was just the main story mission parts that actually matter. Like no
Yeah.
joke. Maybe you can have things like little like little side missions that you can like click on, or like the secret missions like in DMC that you could do or whatever. And then you go to like a hunt or whatever. I don't know. I wish this game, in a weird way, I really wish this game was actually a bit more linear, if that's what they were aiming for, because I
Yeah.
feel like in between, because like when you're playing like an action game is great and all, but like when most of it in between is just this like slogging across the open world and stuff like that, and there's not a lot happening, it's just kind of boring, you know? Like
Yeah.
this is, I hate to say it this way, but like the open world here felt very weirdly Ubisoft-ish. That's like the best way I could. I don't know what that was.
That was me accidentally opening my phone. Is
Oh,
what
okay.
that was.
I thought that was a soundboard.
No, that wasn't. that was me accidentally like
No,
putting
you're
my
good.
phone down and accidentally opening Instagram.
Yeah, but like okay, I'll use an example, and maybe not the best example, but like the Neo games I've been playing. A lot of those games is structured not in like an open world format, but the mission structures. You have your bigger main missions on the open world map that you just kind of click on. It's like, bam, you're starting this mission. But also they have like the tiny little side missions that you knock out in like 5 to 10 minutes. And they are like also on the world map, but they're like these little things. The world map is already kind of built like that in this game. I just wish it's like you click on this, bam, you do this hunt, whatever. No running around in an empty open world. Sorry, that was like a weird tangent there.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're good. But I agree with you. Like, I don't even know if I would call this necessarily an open world. Like,
Well, it's not supposed to be an open world.
yeah,
So, like a full-on open world.
It's just like
Yeah,
big
but some of the
environments
areas
more
are
than anything.
huge, like, and it just kind of like it starts to feel like it. Like,
I think it's more
definitely.
just like it's a big environment, but it's still like, and it has side quests, but like there's not much to do in the big environments other than just kill a million crabs, which is one of my other complaints about this game. You are fighting just random crabs and bees and random forest nonsense for a long time. It's like a
Yeah,
good like
and
30% of this game is just beating up crabs.
Clive is kind of like a god. Like that's another thing that kind of bothered me too. Is you're fighting these basic soldiers, and like
Oh yeah,
you kind of pick on that Clive is kind of has powers akin to a freaking god, considering
yeah.
he can turn into a giant fire demon. So like whenever like these little soldiers are just like, oh, I could kick your ass, I could kick your arse or some shit. It's just like, bro,
That's
have you
funny.
seen this man? He
I-
literally like summons demon arms out his back.
Bro,
Like
I
you're
have-
not touching this, dude.
He'll
I
crush
have
an
a
entire
note.
army with his pecs.
Like, dude, I have an exact note. I have two notes. Whereas one, it's like it's always funny when a character either talks shit either before or after like a fight, and meanwhile during the fight, Clive just hit a 250-piece magic combo, and then like summoned, like went into DT and did a hype beam and all this. But meanwhile, Clive in cutscene is just like, I'm gonna sword fight this guy, and I was like, dude, fuck this, man. Fireball, what are you doing? Summon Ifrit. Like, stop trying to sword fight the guy. You don't need to be doing this.
It's just, it's funny to me. Also, it breaks the immersion a little bit whenever you're fighting like just because they're a couple of levels higher than you or something like that, you're fighting like one of those giant mosquitoes or a regular soldier dude. You drop like one of those moves, like what's a good one? Oh yeah, like Clive summons giant ass lightning bolts out of the sky and slams it down,
Yeah.
and then it just like this big dude's like, that kind of tickled a little bit. Like it's just like, what? It's like you don't even have any magic going on. You're just a big fat dude
You're
with an
just
axe.
there are even times, like sometimes where it's like if you're doing too well in a fight, where it's like, especially like towards the end, because I noticed that Max, he was fighting it was a story fight, And if you start doing too big of a combo on a boss, their health bar will stop going down because they're like, okay, you can't kill him right now during this one stagger moment. It has to. This is the max you can do on the damage, and then he's gotta go do his big attack, and then you can kill him. It's be
It's
like,
like
calm.
you're not skipping phases here.
It's like, no,
Yeah,
no, no, no,
no,
calm down.
no. Like
you, you went a little too
especially
ham.
that especially towards like the end of this game, whenever you're fighting like
Yeah.
a lot of bosses that are like that, and I was just nuking the crap out of them. I'm like, what the heck? It didn't do any damage to him, and it just went right into like a cutscene. It's like, oh, I've been wasting my abilities because I'm doing too much damage to this guy. Like, I
Yeah.
need to actually save this stuff. It's
Because
like,
I'm not on the
God.
right phase. But
Yeah.
you
It's like,
just dropped the lightning orb and then your fire spirits and then you used Bahamut, whatever his seeking orbs are called, and then the hype beam that Bahamut has. And you
yeah,
just fucking melted anything, but the health bar's not going down because like, no, this is only phase one. You gotta calm down.
you gotta
Your
calm down,
microphone
buddy.
didn't do shit.
It's like, yo, chill, big homie. Chill.
That's why I like the hunts so much, because one, they're challenging, like Robert said. I really I think they're the highlight, is the hunts with these like really cool boss fights that are optional. But I just love it whenever like you're just doing your combos, and as soon as most of the time I got to the point where most of the time when I got an enemy down to staggered, they're done. Like, it's just like,
Yeah.
all right, and I'm about to throw everything I got at you, and you will not survive this.
All right, get in.
Ability dumb.
But
This is you good.
and one more thing I'll add with the combat that I really feel like it was missing, in my opinion, is, and we kind of talked about this before on like Fresh Picks, but this combat system is very much like simple melee magic strings. But also you have like the iconic ability. So you have like your B button special. Maybe it's like a teleport. Maybe it's like a grab, or maybe it's a block. I love the block.
The block's really cool.
And then and then also you have like the abilities that go on cooldown. Those are cool, but I found that once I burned through a lot of those and there's still a fight going on, I'm like, all right, just throwing out the same string. Maybe I'll do magic bursts in between. Maybe I'll throw them into the aerial and do like a similar string, and that's about it.
Like,
It feels like when you're in cooldown, you're out of things to do, and you're like, all right, I'm just waiting for cooldown to come up. Until then, I'll do a bunch of boring stuff.
I guess I'll send Torgal at him.
Yeah, I stopped using Torgal after like Benedicta, honestly.
Fair.
It's
Poor
like
Torgal.
lockjaw damage.
It's bad. You know what's the worst part is, it's bad because I actually would switch over to the Torgal menu almost instantly, not because I would use Torgal, but just because I never wanted to accidentally like fat thumb a potion. Like, I just didn't, because I never really needed to heal that much most of the time. So yeah, that was a little sad. But I think what the game could have used is, they could have if you're gonna copy action games, take a couple of notes from them. Throw in a couple of delay combos.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna
maybe
say. I was like, they need a delay combo.
delay combos. Maybe throw in like ways where you can weave into the combo the burning blade, which is basically Clive's equivalent of like a heavy attack, but you can really only do one. You can't really pull it into a string of combos. It's like, maybe if you're a way you could do that. It just needed a little something like that beyond just the iconic abilities. I feel like they put too much of their eggs in a basket on the iconic abilities and not enough into like Clive's actual sword play.
Because it's like when you're on cooldown for all your abilities, you have like a 4-hit string, and then you have like a 4-hit air combo string. And typically what I ended up doing is, if my stuff was on cooldown, I pretty much always ran Garuda's ability, because having, I think it was Wicked Weave that grabs them in the air. It could be another.
It's Nero. It's Nero. It's Nero grab. Let's not call it what. Let's call it what it is.
So we're getting a lot of things mixed up. So I believe Wicked Weave is actually the thing that you get for combo enders in Bayonetta. It's called Deadly Embrace. I'm pretty sure. Like, I'm 90% sure it's called Deadly Embrace.
Yeah, Deadly Embrace.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like what I would do against a lot of the smaller enemies is I hit them a few times, jump in the air, Deadly Embrace, air combo, like hit them twice, air step, hit them twice, air step, hit them twice, Deadly Embrace again. Just do like, Nero combos, like they're saying. Is it kind of, it works for a lot of enemies. And this is gonna be a weird ass like comparison, but I feel like a lot of this game's like problems in like the action department I have with the same problems with like Tales of Arise, where the normal enemy variety is very bad through like the first like half of the game. You've pretty much seen all the normal enemies the game has to offer, so you might see different variations of them,
Yeah.
but they all kind of follow the same templates, if you get what I'm saying. So
Yeah,
it's like you see someone that looks different, but then they start fighting like an enemy you've seen before. Like, oh, okay, it's just a reskin. And the same thing
Uh,
of like, oh, you find a few different like moves that really work. You could just spam those and you
yeah.
win most fights.
I will make the argument. I feel like there is a little bit of enemy variety. Like, oh, there's sorcerers, there's guys that cast barriers, there's guys that enchant them. But anything that doesn't have a stagger meter, you don't really fight that often because Clyde freaking rips through them like they're made
yeah,
of
pretty much.
paper. So it's like, well, there might be enemy variety. It doesn't matter. They don't live long enough for me to tell. Like, the most
Yeah.
times I've ever seen an enemy attack is just like if is when Max ever backed up and started whistling at enemies because he wanted to get the counter hit moves. And
Same.
that's
But yeah,
it.
Like
it's
I was in the same boat too. Like
Yeah.
you nuke through those mooks so freaking fast. And like and also yeah, I do agree with you, Drew. Like it is nice once they start throwing out actual like mages who cast like cure and then like protect or even bravery to make enemies like less likely to flinch and all that in fights. That's good, but that comes in like a little over halfway through the game, I believe. Like there's a good portion of game where you're like I don't think those may just pop up until either right when you're going after Hugo or a little after you do.
Like by the
yeah, it's
time
around that
that by the
point.
time like the mages learn how to do barrier, you do enough damage where you two shot the barrier.
Yeah, pretty
And it's just
much.
like what why did you even
Yeah,
this would
because
have
it's
been an
like
interesting thing at the start.
yeah, because it's like the thing of like combat's not very hard because typically your levels are going to be fine because they're not super consequential and your gear is kind of what matters. And like we kind of talked about earlier, it's not hard to be on gear. Like the normal things you can buy from the shop as you progress through the game are more than suitable for whatever you have to fight. So if as long as you like try to keep like up with like your equipment, which again not hard to do, you're really not going to have that much trouble with the game. Which again, as like it all comes back to, it's a good thing and a bad thing, just depending on what camp you're in. If you kind of just want to get through the game, then that's great. But if you're kind of people like us who we like to do a lot of crazy shit in action games, it kind of leaves you wanting for more.
Yeah. But it's like the sign of a good action game is typically one that manages to force you out of your comfort zone where it like makes you want to think. Like Devil May Cry will do something like that constantly where it will throw like a boss at you where like hey you can't just do your typical strings on this, you got to learn how to fight this boss. Like even though they're not particularly tough, like Artemis for example, Artemis is really good at like teaching like hey you need to learn how to use Nero's like grab to close in on like bigger enemies and to also do aerial combos because Nero's actually really good in the air. That's probably where he's the strongest. So like, and I don't really feel like oh, sorry, I got off track. Let's talk through that. I feel like because I realized I was about to overlap back to like some of my older points again.
Yeah, yeah. But
Uh,
yeah, so going into like another sort of gameplay thing is kind of what goes on in between story beats where you get a lot of side quests. I feel like that those segments can really break up the pace if you like want to go into those. Um and a lot of the side quests kind of don't feel the most consequential. Like what Seth was talking about earlier. Um they kind of are just 10-minute like time killers. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
typically they follow the MMO format of go here, kill thing, go back to client, get reward, the end. That's pretty much how they're kind of set up with the gameplay. So it almost makes you resent them if you're in a point where it's like, I want to keep going with the story, but I also want to clear all these side quests off the map. Well, you either choose to not do the side quests or you suck it up and do them and then just kind of feel drained afterwards.
Yeah.
Something that is really helpful though is something that they also take from 14, which is like the icons for the side quests. So typically, if you see a quest that had like the little green marker, if it has like a plus sign next to it, that's a signal like, hey, you're gonna get something that's worthwhile out of it. And then if it doesn't, then it's a quest that's more for like the world building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something neat that I actually saw someone else like talk about it like on a podcast or something like that. And I was like, huh, I started to pay attention to that. I thought that was neat. And I told Robert about it. He's like, oh yeah, that's actually a carryover from 14. I was like, oh, that's neat. That's helpful.
Mhm.
And I think we'll talk about the side quest stories in themselves later. So I actually hold my tongue on that one.
Yeah. Let's see what other point. I feel like I had one other point, like just of the, because I feel like we pretty much kind of mixed our general impressions with the gameplay impressions. So I'm trying to decide like, okay, do I want to go to the next like big gameplay thing, or do I want to go to story, then kind of cover that later? Um, no, we can kind of weave that in a bit with the story, since just to kind of get things moving a little bit. So
Transition.
yeah, so the big focus of the RPG, the thing that they wanted you to get like the most time with, the story. Um, this is something they're like,
Story.
this is like the most fleshed out Final
Yeah.
Fantasy world. There's like so much like dramatic moments,
Hmm.
crazy battles, heartbreaking moments too. Like this game has it all.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about the story after having played and or watched through it?
Um. So this comparison has been brought up a lot, and a lot of people like comparing this game to Game of Thrones, and for the sole reason of they are both fantasy, and they have knights and stuff. And
Wait,
I
hold
will
on,
say,
Drew. Before you go any further, Robert
Oh
actually
no.
found like a Robert. You brought this up to me. You need to share this with Drew because the game doesn't really explain this. But Drew, I think Robert has found the Game of Thrones connection.
So So
okay,
earlier today, I was listening to a story synopsis just to kind of get like refresh on things, and the guy got up a very interesting point about Clive and Joshua's parents. Um,
oh, they're
so to
cousins.
keep, yeah, to keep, to
Yeah,
keep the
Ah,
bloodline pure and to keep the Phoenix dominant genes in the Rossfield family, arranged marriage between cousins.
yeah. I mean, that's not even Game of Thrones. That's real life, guys. I don't know if you realize,
Yeah,
like,
again,
that's how
I
royal
was
blood still exists technically today.
Yeah, I was messaging one of my friends earlier, and he's like, "Yeah, that's like a common thing in like European history, and
Yeah,
this game
that's
has a
a thing.
very distinct like European like setting."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. That is accurate. Yeah. I kind of realized that soon, and they're like, the second they were like, "Oh, we have to keep the Phoenix bloodline terms," like, they siblings? No. Okay, they're cousins. I guess.
Yeah, see, I didn't put that together.
Okay.
Like that
Yeah.
just went like over my head, I guess.
same,
Yeah.
same for me. Like I just I don't know. It just didn't hit me like that. It was just like it was just never brought up, so I just never thought about it. And then just actually seeing it, it's like, oh, and it's like, and granted, when Robert did tell me that, it's like, at least they're just cousins. Could be a lot worse.
It was
Yeah.
arranged.
Look, man, it was. You had to have been there, man. It was just the time period. Yeah, no, but getting back to Game of Thrones, which has real incest, by the way. Yeah, not this fake cousin shit. Uh,
Drew's like,
God.
this shit's not hard enough for me.
this shit's for this is casual incest, as
I
opposed
need
to
my
ranked,
real incest.
as opposed to ranked competitive incest.
Oh my God.
Ugh.
I'm sorry.
Get on
I'm
with
sorry.
it.
I'm sorry. Okay, but no, to get back to the Game of Thrones comparison, it's not is the main point of that. It's not Game of Thrones. Because the only reason that people say it is because it is in like this fantasy world setting. Which Game of
Very
Thrones
dark
popularized, but
fantasy.
wasn't obviously didn't start that. But like the actual story itself, it's darker compared to most Final Fantasies, but not as groundbreaking or dark or gritty as I think a lot of people think it is. Like, yes, they say the F word. Yes, characters have sex with each other. Good for them.
Well, they don't even show it though. That's the worst part.
I thought there was one point where you saw Jill's tits or something.
No,
No, you don't. You actually never see tits.
they do an excellent job with camera work in this game.
Yeah.
Censoring it.
You get so close.
Bro, when I was
you don't
watching the
see
playthrough,
anything.
there was a moment where like it just cut to Max's face because I was like, oh, they're probably just showing actual nudity at this point. I
I
thought
can
they
tell you
actually
that.
showed.
Close, but not quite.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of close but not quite there moments.
Okay. But anyway, there's like but like the reason like Game of Thrones is popular is because there's multiple stories that intertwine with each other, and it's gritty and it's real, and characters can actually like die at any moment. This is still like I don't want to criticize it too bad because I actually do enjoy it. I actually think like it's a good story. Especially at the beginning, I actually was like, okay, it's interesting, the houses thing, and I like the idea that these aren't summons anymore; they're icons. People have powers that can turn them into these beasts, and the way different kingdoms react to those people. And even though the branded issue does have a big plot hole of just like, how are the people that can throw fireballs the weak in this world?
Yeah, the oppressed here.
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
I mean, there's a different argument for that. But like, I think for the story, it still works. I will say though, it drops hard when they start getting to the final boss and he start being like, I am actually God, and it starts doing the Final Fantasy thing of just like everyone's doing big speeches and monologues, and like I'm just sitting there just like begging Clive, just like, just tell him to eat a bag of dicks and fight him, man. Like, come on, we've been doing this for too long. I get it.
You think this is like Western fantasy, but no, it was anime all along.
It's so anime at the end. It gets
anime.
really anime.
Friendship overcoming God. It's like
the
great.
one character that I would argue stays Western and he's one of my favorite characters. I love Gav so much because
Yes.
Gav is the one character that doesn't realize he's in a Final Fantasy game. Gav is hilarious. He's the one character that's like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is this anime bullshit? Why does your dog have a devil trigger? And everyone's just like, yeah, that's just normal. And Gav's like, no, it's not, guys. Like, let's talk about this. And Gav talks like a normal person. He doesn't talk in like big monologues. That's why I love him.
I've heard more F words out of Gav than the entirety of the rest of the series
Gav,
combined.
like, Clive will drop one or two, like, pretty quickly. Most other characters don't curse. Majority of the reason this game is rated M is because of Gav. I feel like if you take him out, and probably some of the almost nudity scenes, like, it would be a rated T game. Like, I mean, there's still gets violence and stuff, but like, Gav, yeah. But still, like, Gav is like the reason this is like strong language. He's carrying that. So like, I really like it at the beginning. I think like the world actually is interesting in the way they treat magic. And they kind of just divulge into what basically Final Fantasy VII's plot of just like, and then they become eco-terrorist. And then, but it just, I feel like it just drops the ball so hard at the end where it's just like, and now we fight God with the power of friendship. And I'm just like, okay, well, I kind of like the kingdom stuff, but it is what it is. Yeah, so what are your thoughts?
I'll go ahead and go here. It's weird because I'm like the exact opposite here. Because like I was less interested in the kingdom stuff, and I actually got a little bit more interested in the story and the second half. Not because of Ultima and the god stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. That stuff kind of lame. But I feel like it's because I really struggled to really like. And I don't want to make it like I hate these characters. I really don't. It's just, let me put it this way. I really struggled to make a connection with many of these characters. I felt like Gav, I love that you guys love Gav. I was kind of indifferent to him. He was like, he has a couple of funny moments, and that's really about it for me personally. And oh my god, the game puts so much focus on the relationship between like Clive and Jill, and it's not giving, man.
I'll agree
I'm
with you on
sorry.
that. I will agree with you on that, though. Nah.
There's like, I'm sorry, there's like no chemistry between them. It feels like it's like a brick wall. Like it's like two brick walls talking to each other, pretty much.
I get
Um,
a little bit more from Jill, but it's very much like Clive does feel like stonewalling her at points.
yeah, I just, yeah, I feel that, and it's, I don't know. Like for example, like I feel bad because it feels like Jill's purpose in this game isn't to even be her own character. She's just supposed to be the female love interest that always shows support to the male lead no matter what. Um, because like her kind of own personal story arc is when they go back to like the, I forget what it's called, Iron Blood Kingdom. They go
Yeah.
back there and Jill's like, I have to kill this dude. I have to do it. He made me do all these awful things. Like, all right, cool, let's do it. And then you meet this guy. It's like, hey, I saw you in like the opening cutscene somewhere. And then she kills him and then it's all over. It's like, okay, what was that about? Like,
Yeah.
you don't really get to see why this dude was such a piece of shit. Jill just kind of kills him and it's like, all right, I guess that's Jill's personal arc over with. Now it's
Yeah.
all about her fawning over Clive and just reinforcing everything that he does. Like
So if you,
Jill,
oh, sorry.
sorry, it's just, for me the problem with Jill is she only just felt like an extension of Clive's character rather than being her own person, and that's why I just could not vibe with her.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
she might as well been like the Joy like AI from fucking Blade Runner, you know, like the. So like that's why and even she had more character in the Blade Runner movie. But like I I want to get to the good part. I promise you. I have to bring up this comparison because I feel like where this game gets great is when it starts to focus on Clive and Joshua's relationship.
Can I
Like,
bring up a moment with Jill though, real quick before we get
yes,
into Clive? Because I don't know if we'll come back to Jill. It's not a lot to come back
that's
to.
a fair
But
point.
I do want to. I agree with you definitely. That love story is not hitting. But I think the worst moment, even worse than like when Jill gets her own arc, quote unquote. I think the worst moment for Jill is like after the beach scene. Y'all know it's the one I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
And then the next moment, like the next time Clive gets her icon, and when it's talked about is with Joshua and Clive. And while it's a good conversation, I like it. Why did we not see this with Jill and like, unless I skip something, but like the fact that like Clive just takes it and assuming she volunteered it to him, like there was never, there should have been a moment where Jill's like, no, I need to fight by your side, and Clive's trying to convince her like, no, you'll still be useful, but like I need this power. And
well, it's like after she gets like pretty injured and whatnot, so it's like she may not be fully in fighting like form.
but like there still should be like she should still have some kind of pushback. I feel like she just kind of gives that up so easily, and like this should be a big deal, and it is later, but with a different character.
Right.
Like, it's a big deal with Joshua.
Yeah, it's
and
like, oh, the man has to bring it up.
Yeah,
Women can't
exactly.
fight for themselves.
Exactly. Like, why doesn't Jill slap Clive and just be like, no, I'm not going to be a damsel in distress? And like, Clive has to explain, like, you're injured. I will get more use out of your power than you will. Like, we need to do, like, that should have been a really good conversation. But she's just like, oh, you want my ice powers? Yeah, sure. You just have to, like,
it's
quote unquote
kinda,
dominate me.
It's kind of just Clive.
Dominate
like,
all over the place.
You like what I do with that? I was proud of that joke. I wrote that joke down.
Yeah, it's pretty much Clive going more on this I need to do this on my own kind of thing, and then Jill just being like, all right.
Yeah, she's really okay with it, and it's just like,
it's weird because it's like the conversation seems to imply that Jill is like at the beach scene. I also agree. It's a weird scene in general. It's like Jill is trying to get Clive to see this, where it's just like, you need to understand that you're not by yourself on this. You need to like trust other people. And then Clive kind of does a weird thing. It's like, you're right. That's why I need to take your power. It's like, and then
that's
Jill's
why
like,
I need to
right,
make you less useful.
It's like,
he
what?
kind of
No,
turns it back into his whole thing.
Yeah, and it's just like, what? No, did you not listen to anything she just fucking said, bro? It's
So
like
it's
the
like
exact
that.
opposite of what she was saying.
That for me is like Jill's worst moment, where it's just like she's too involved in the fact that she's finally having sex with this man to just notice
Yeah.
that like he's taking your power. And I don't think like he's do like I think like they genuinely care about it, but it almost like out of context, it almost feels like Clive is almost like manipulating her. Just like I just need the power, but I know that's not what they're doing. It's just a weird thing of just like I feel
It's
like that
given that impression.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that conversation that Clive has with Joshua should have been with Jill. Like that should have been yours, but I don't that
Yeah.
was like that was Jill's worst moment for me, but I'll let you talk about either more Jill
Okay,
or
if
talk
since we're
about
talking
Joshua
about the
now.
beach scene, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure if we'll ever get a chance, I do want to bring up one thing with like the beach scene. I one, it bothered me that like they like obviously Clive had feelings with her for her since they were kids and they didn't do anything, and then they didn't do anything when they were with Sid. And then like and then finally 5 years pass. There's a whole time jump and they don't do anything with each other. It's like really? Like you fuckers don't make a move at all?
Like
Like what the fuck is happening?
The
And so we get
relationship stayed stagnant because the cameras weren't rolling.
yeah,
there
apparently
was
what did Clive do in 5 years? Take Sid's name and fuck all else. um but
no, he actually fuck less else because he didn't fuck the thing we were supposed to, which is Jill.
he didn't fuck anything. But also like the thing that ruined it for me is like this scene is like I knew it was coming the way it was set up. I mean, obviously they're naked on the beach together. Of course, it's going to be the scene where they finally like kiss or whatever. The part where Clive is just like they're about to kiss, and then Clive just has to say like, what was it? I'm trying to remember. He said like, I didn't think such a small smile could bring me such warmth. It's just like, bro, fucking kiss her. Like, it's like if you said this to like your significant other, they'd be like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Kills the mood. For
like,
Jill, it just made her even crazier for him.
it's like, what
Like
the
man,
fuck? It's like,
hey,
just,
Clive
uh,
is not vibing with Clive's Riz right now.
yeah. It's just, it was such a weird scene to me. I'm just like, nope. No normal person would say this, and no normal person would be like, "I don't want to be kissed by you right now." That was weird. Why'd you
It was
say
ve-
that?
it was very much
You
a
had some
scene
mood.
made by it was made by a scene just made by like dudes, and they never at one point brought like a woman into it. It's like, hey, what would be a romantic thing to say right before like you start making out on a
Nothing.
beach?
Like, literally, the woman would be like, "Nothing. Don't fucking say anything."
Yeah. So I kind of want
It's
to.
it.
You
Oh,
finish
hold
it.
on. Yeah, and like I think it's one of those things where, and it's just a general issue I feel like with this game is there's a lot of moments where I feel like you guys don't have to keep saying things. You know, you could
Yeah.
just basically like just let the scene speak for itself. Like
Yeah,
it's
stop
fine.
talking.
Also, I really think in order to earn this M rating, it would have been great if like after Clive does the whole like your smile brings me warmth speech, it just does a hard cut to them. Just Clive just drilling the shit out of Jill, like on the beach. Just like
Jesus
that would have
Christ.
earned the M
Jesus
rating.
Christ.
No, could you imagine that? It's just like, holy shit.
That
It
would
really
be
is
such
Game
It's
of
not
Thrones.
even
That would be
like
such
animated.
total
It just like
whiplash.
it just hard like jump cuts to just like real porn with like a
That's
dude in a wig and like a
that's
girl with
fucking
like
whiplash.
dyed her hair silver.
It's just like,
No,
oh my fucking god.
no, okay, so I wanna back up here to the whole thing with this game is that they really went hard on a lot of the world building. There's a lot of political things going on. There's a whole character that fills you in on everything going on in the world.
Yeah.
They very much want you to get immersed in this. They're obviously really proud of it. Something really neat is that during the cutscenes, you can actually pause them and get active lore. So you can get
Active lore.
additional like tidbits about characters or places or concepts that are like applicable to that scene. So like, for example, if you haven't played in a week and you might have forgot like, oh, who's this character? then you could pause the game and there'll likely be information like, oh, okay, here's so and so, and this is kind of what they're doing, what they're about, which I think is really cool, just to kind of help keep everybody on like page with that. Because again, they really want people to go through the story. They're really proud of what they've like written, and I think for the most part, it's fine. I never found everything too personally gripping. I I kind of found the concepts of the world more interesting than like the execution. Like a big thing of this game is magic users known as bearers. So typically in a lot of fantasy stories, people who use magic are like either it's common in that world or makes them like special. Like, oh, this
Okay.
hero can like cast fireballs. He's like the chosen one. And then here, it's like he can cast fireballs. Enslave this man.
Yeah.
Like the
Put a
people who
brand
can
on this one's face.
yeah, it's like the people who can cast magic instead of being special, they're like looked down upon. They're treated like slaves. Like
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see that obviously this group that's like a lot more powerful, like has more like, potential to do like crazy things with like their magic. They can't do much because they've basically been enslaved. So I think the concept of that's really interesting, but I think the execution is kind of hit or miss. Like I think it isn't entirely handled the best, which again, it's like stories about slavery. There's really only so much you can do and it's not get too distasteful.
Yeah.
Um, and other things of like the they really want you to get immersed of like the politics of the world. Like here's like so and so kingdom. They like invade like the Rossfield like domain or I'm trying to remember the name of the thing. But
Phoenix Gate.
you're you're very much trying they're very much trying to get you like involved in a lot of this. But the thing is, you typically don't feel super involved with it because Clive isn't super involved with it. Because like Clive's role in the story is much more of like a personal one at first, which is, his brother was killed, he wants to find his brother's killer, he's pretty much driven by revenge. um so he's not going to care as much about the general politics. So you see all this going on, but then it's like, what's my place in this? And that's kind of a theme that does persist through a lot of it, because even like Sid, who's like basically Clive's like mentor, um, he's not super involved with this in the present. Like he's had history of a lot of these figures in the past. Like he's had history with like Benedicta because he served in like the military in the kingdom. Like
Now he's
he
had
used
history
to.
because everyone in this world has had history with Benedicta, apparently.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's
also
another
that.
thing is like Benedicta's been with fucking Hugo, been with Sid, been with Barnabas. Like
Barnabas. Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
been all over the place.
God,
But it's
Betty.
like Clive doesn't have like as much stake in it, so it makes you feel like, okay, what this is cool and all, but why should I care about this?
Yeah, because
Um
like a lot of the times whenever you are getting into like the whole kingdom like political shit, it has nothing to do really most of the time with what Clive's doing immediately. It's always cutting to a different character like having it. It's almost like watching like a whole different thing unfold, and it doesn't. I think the issue is like there's nothing wrong with that. As Drew pointed out, Game of Thrones was all about like having seemingly unconnected plot threads like connecting somehow. It was just like this is a video game. Most of us are only doing the big meathead fighting and none of the political shit.
yeah, because like the parts of the story I was a lot more invested in were a lot more of the personal stuff. Like, the relationship between Clive and Joshua. Um, and then like Clive and Sid, like a lot of those interactions I was more invested in because you were right there with the action. It's like I don't care about what's going on in the greater world right now because that's never been super prevalent. But it's all this personal stuff that's really kept me engaged. Like, the history of like Clive's family, like him reuniting with his uncle at one point in the story and them having a little interesting bonding moment. to like prove like, hey, this is Clive. He wasn't really killed. He's still very much alive. Um, Stuff like that, I was a lot more engaged with. Even if like Clive as a main character himself, kind of going all over the place here, but Clive, we've talked about him a lot. He's kind of an alright protagonist. I think he gets the job done with helping you get through the story and him having like personal like stakes in a lot of this stuff. But he does kind of feel generic in a lot of points. His motivations can be pretty, bare bones for a lot of the time. So it kind of just doesn't make you feel as connected to him as you do with a lot of more of the side characters, like other characters in the stories like Joshua or Dion that you meet later on. Like I kind of felt more invested in their stories than Clive's. Like even if Clive kind of had a big part in Joshua's and an alright part with Dion, but that was more Joshua. But it didn't feel like Clive was really as deep of a protagonist as I would have liked. Like especially compared to like other Final Fantasy games. Like you there's a lot more going on with characters like Titus from Final Fantasy X or like Zidane from Final Fantasy IX. A lot of those characters just have a lot more going on throughout the whole story to kind of make you more interested in them. But Clive, you're kind of just interested in because of happenstance. And there's some cool moments with Clive. Like for example, when he first unleashes his devil trigger, he has a whole like fight where he has to kind of come to the realization that he wasn't the one, or there wasn't another killer the night that Joshua and their father died. It was
It
actually
was Clive, yeah.
Clive that was the one that killed his brother, and kind of the big fight that is basically him just having to, stop running from the truth about that event. Like that was really cool. If I remember I was texting Seth and he was telling me that like it's cool, but it felt a little too direct is what you told me.
Is yeah, the word I used was like it's very on the nose.
Yeah.
Like it just like, oh yes, I must accept myself by fighting myself. It's just like I have to fight my literal inner demons. It's like, all right, cool. It's just like, sorry for me, that kind of stuff is like, I don't usually have a problem with it, but it's the tonal problem. You know, it's like you're trying to be Game of Thrones, but you're also trying to do this like, for the lack of better words, anime sparkle boy bullshit. Like I like it just like it's just it's like the two tones contrast. Like there's no, okay, Drew, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine there's not a part where Jon Snow is like, I have to fight my inner demons and he has to fight like a fucking shadow clone of himself, right?
Actually, that exact moment happens, and then it's weird. At
Well,
one point,
fuck,
Jon
well,
Snow
that's the whole
turns
point.
into like a giant like icon, like a giant dragon, and they fight each other. It only happens like in one scene. They never talk about it again. I'm being sarcastic. No, that bullshit doesn't happen.
Look, you
Yeah,
could have
but
told me it wasn't sarcastic and I would have believed you.
I did a good job. I think I did a good job on that. That was pretty good. No, Jon Snow does,
yeah,
no one ever fights the Shadow Link or whatever he's called.
I have to fight myself, and it's like
Yeah.
it's cool in like a story that's not that super serious. Like, I don't get me wrong, I love those kinds of tropes too, but it has to have a time and a place. And you know, as we kind of discussed before, like I feel like Final Fantasy 16 has a bit of an identity crisis. It can't decide if it wants to be an RPG or an action game. And in that same breath, it's like this game can't decide, do you want to be Final Fantasy or do you want to be The Witcher? Like, which is it? Like, what do
Yeah.
you want to be?
I will say also, it's like, because in my opinion, the most interesting part of the story was when Clive is looking for like his brother's killer. And I feel like we as the audience all know it's like, okay, well, it's you. Like, you're the killer. And to me, that was like the most interesting dynamic because I'm like, okay, assuming even like the kid is alive, how is like, what's Clive gonna do? Like, how is he gonna continue his life once he figures out the truth? And that's why I thought like the beginning of the beginning part's most interesting. It did also kind of lose me when he's like, "Oh my god, it's me," and like I thought it was super interesting when he's telling Sid to like not kill me, but then when he goes into his dream world and fights himself, I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, that's a bit. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Where I was like, that's exactly how I put it. Like, that's a bit on the nose. We could have been slightly more subtle about that, but whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think
well,
here's a
it gets the point across, I guess.
Yeah.
it's like, and here's something that like, and I am not taking credit for this whatsoever. Someone else came with this idea. I'm just simply relaying this. A good way to tell if like a character, and I wouldn't say this is like a be all end all rule, but it's kind of a nice sort of like, I suppose, rule of thumb, is a good way to tell a character is actually interesting in of themselves is you've got to ask, okay, can I realistically see what this character is going to go on to do after they save the world? Are they going to go open up their own baking shop? Are they going to become a writer? You know, something along those lines. What do you envision Clive is going to be after the world is saved? I don't know.
Sure.
Like, I really, because like if you think about it, it's just like he's just a dude who fights.
Yeah, he's
Like,
really good at killing things.
I guess he'd go rail Jill's braids out.
Jesus.
Wow, so that's
Source filmmakers make it happen.
it just no, but like I was like, you just become the god of this world, I guess, because anything that Clive could, like, he has the power of everything now. Like,
yeah, and that's the weird part. Is like I feel like Clive needed something to give himself be more interesting, like have interests outside of just fighting and stuff like that, you know. I mean, I know at least he's not like some sort of bloodthirsty warrior or something like that. It's just that he just doesn't have a lot going on for him. And he's not bad. Like I wouldn't say he's like a bad character. Like he kind of reminds me a lot of I'm gonna bring this comparison up. Like Kirito from Sword Art Online.
No, that's a bad character. Yeah.
No, hold on. I'm gonna stand by this. The problem, I feel like the problem, like Kirito and with Clive, and this is gonna apply to both of them, is the characters themselves aren't bad. Like if you actually watch the show, at least to the part I watched, yes, they're both a little edgy, but they're not like overly edgy. Like Robert, correct me if I'm wrong. Kirito's not that edgy of a protagonist, right? Like most of the time, remember he was like generally quiet, kind of kept himself, but was helpful to other people, and he would also do the whole like I have to shoulder this burden alone shit too.
The
But
only
he
times
wasn't
he's
like
like
an edgy one.
overly edgy is to kind of play the role. Because the thing is, like in episode 2, after they beat the boss, they're like, "Oh, there's beta testers here. Like, we need to kill the beta testers or whatever." They're obviously like holding information from us, and he kind of decided to take on the bad guy role of that to kind of protect the other like beta testers that were, also just trapped in there like everybody else. So
Right.
he kind of plays it more of as a character, a persona, on top of his already kind of, him being an awkward teenager.
Yeah, and I think that, and the thing is like their problem with their characters isn't that. It's the fact that for both Kirito and for Clive, a majority of the story, almost anything they face, you feel like they're not in danger. They're gonna take care of it real quick. Like I watched like the first arc of Sword Art Online. I did not finish the part where they go to the fantasy world. Robert, I don't remember what that was called. I stopped when, funnily enough, when Kirito turned into
was
a
a fantasy world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but like that was like a weird sci-fi fantasy world, and then the other was like a hard on like elf world shit. We're getting off track here. But the thing is like the problem with them is like they're both good guys. They're both nice. It's just that like I need something a little bit more than just like, yeah, they're nice. You know, like as a character to be invested in, and I think that's the hard part with like Clive is like the most interesting thing about him is his powers, and that is not a good sign. The most interesting part about your character shouldn't be the powers. It should be the character. And I feel like with Clive, I don't know, it was just hard for me to like ever really like resonate with him. Like I said, I don't think he was bad. It just I found it hard to resonate with him. I also felt like he never really had a challenge presented to him most of the game. I never felt like he was ever in danger.
Yeah, even with some of like the big on like icon fights, which I want to get into before we start kind of closing this out. Um, the icon fights are, the characters that are the dominants get the abilities of icons, which are summons from the previous games. Like, Clive can take on the power of Ifrit, Joshua can take the power of Phoenix, Jill, Shiva, so on and so forth. Um, a big thing with this game that they showed off in the trailers was the big like kaiju fights. Like you get matchups like Ifrit going up against like Garuda, or you can see like Phoenix going up against Bahamut, like stuff like that. It was something that they really wanted to show and have you kind of experience in the
Where they
game.
put the money into. This is the budget of the game, right
I feel like
here.
my PlayStation's gonna melt.
Yes, this these are the budget moments, as we like to
I
call
will
them.
say, funny enough, those parts, in terms of frame rate, ran fine for me.
Yeah.
Because that's what they put that's where the budget is.
It's like
That's
if
where they're
nothing
like,
else works
these
well,
this
it's
is the
this
system
fucking part.
sellers. These are the parts that's gonna work.
Yeah, because like those are the big like spectacle moments of the
Yeah.
game. It's like this is what you're building up to is these moments, like especially like the Titan and Bahamut fights. I thought were just like incredible set
Uh,
pieces to look at,
the
but that's
as
kind
someone
of
who's
the double-edged sword of
yeah.
those is that they're really cool set pieces, kind of mindless fights.
Yeah.
I will make the argument of, and again, this is just like as a view, that obviously, as someone who's just watching, the Titan fights are going to be my favorite parts. But I will make the argument. The very least, I think the Bahamut fight is the best for a couple reasons. One, it's it has story relevance because it's the first time where it's Joshua and Clive fighting together, and also they're fighting a character that I don't care. I actually give a damn if he dies or not. I think Seth, you actually brought this up at one point when we were talking about the podcast, but you couldn't say his name because I hadn't gotten there yet. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I know how these fights end for the other guy, and I don't want it to end that way for this guy. And so like that was the fight where I was engaged because it's a kaiju fight, and that's cool and that's awesome, and it's like Pacific Rim where I can just turn my brain off and it's just big explosions and they're flying up into space and then Clive and Joshua do a freaking fusion dance, and it's badass, and it turns into Dragon Ball at one point. But then like at the back of that, I'm also like, all right, but don't kill him too hard. Like I actually like,
It's like, hey man, he's up.
hey, like I know it's like it's Bahamut. Like yes, we gotta hit him hard, but it's like it's not like with Kupka who turns into Titan where I'm like that fight's really cool and visually really interesting, but Kupka's a kind of a dumb character, so I don't care if you kill him right here.
Yeah, he's a simp. The character that Drew hates the most. So yeah, you could definitely kill him.
Yeah, he's a simp. All right, I will always.
But yeah, I agree with you, Drew. Though,
yeah.
like full-heartedly there. Like, one that I didn't really care for most of these icon fights, but I will say this one was the one exception. Was the Bahamut fight? It has you're hit with so much emotion. Like, I didn't pop off a lot in this game, admittedly. Like a lot of people do. I see it online and all this. Like, oh man, I popped off so hard here. But like, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, okay, I need to sit up for this. Whenever I saw that Joshua and Clive were coming together to fight Bahamut, I'm like, shit just got real. This is fucking awesome, dude. It's kind of like
they do the freaking double hype beam at him. It was sick.
Yeah, and like it's good because it's like the game had been like, I shit you not, there were so many scenes in this game where it's almost comical where Clive will be there when Joshua was just there a second ago, or Joshua will get there just a second after Clive was there.
Yeah.
And even though it's kind of comical, it does feel so good when you finally see the brothers actually together, like actually together, fighting together side by side. And then they're doing it in a big kaiju fight, and it's kind of reminding me of Kong versus Godzilla when Kong and Godzilla team up to fight Mecha Godzilla, like that shit. And then on top of that, you're like, you get the power of like, yes, they're together finally after all this time. But then also it's like, but I don't want you to kill Dion though. That dude's really cool.
He's
Like
arguably one of the most interesting characters in the story.
I will say like
Please.
here, my two favorite characters in this game are Joshua and Dion. Those were my favorites, like hands down.
They're definitely the best. Well, they're definitely like the most well written. I will give
I
that to yeah.
fuck me, man. I would take a whole game instead of no, like I guess all the offense to Clive. I don't know. I've already said my piece on him, but
Yeah.
I would take a whole game of just Dion. His arc is so good. It's like the fact that like everything is set up. Ultima seating the Ultima like possibly infiltrating the royal family. The tension between Dion and basically his stepmom and his half brother and like
Yeah.
all this this like tension and he's like your father won't let you take the throne and all this stuff but like Dion isn't doing it because he wants the throne. He's doing it because he legitimately cares for his people. He's mindful of his powers. That's why he's not going all out with it because he knows he's like a fucking walking nuke. But
Yeah.
also because he like despite the fact that his dad's kind of a piece of shit, he still loves him and he tries to save him. It's like, and that's what makes the turn with it so tragic. Like I said,
Yeah.
there were not a lot of twists that got me in this game, but the part where Dion accidentally kills his dad actually got me. I'm like, oh god, like holy shit. Like,
Dion is he is the closest to Game of Thrones writing to anyone else. Everyone else is an anime character, but his whole story arc and like that kingdom, that is something I could see in a Game of Thrones where it's just like the stepmom comes in and births another child. And even though like the first son is like this big prodigy and a lot of people like him, the throne's relinquished to the other kid, like this young child. And I'm like, that actually kind of happens. And that is actually, now that I just said that out loud, that's just the Lannister storyline with like a few less characters.
but it's good. It works really
Yeah.
well.
No, it works. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, oh god, I love Dion. Like I love it too. Weirdly enough, I think he probably gets the best romantic scenes, and that's with Terrence. And like
Yeah.
I didn't really get like emotionally choked up really in this game, except for the part where he basically has to say goodbye to Terrence. Where he's like, I want you to go and I want you to take care of this like little girl that took care of me. And it's like this is goodbye for them. I'm like, oh fuck. Like it actually got me. Like I was like, damn. I'm sorry. I'm like a full on like Dion like fucking stan. Even though he probably had like maybe in total like 30 minutes of screen time in this game, I loved him. He was like my favorite. It's almost a shame that like the moment that he decides to help out the crew, it's almost the very end of the game, and he just spoiler, he
Yeah.
dies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I really hijacked that really bad there.
No, you're good. So like yeah, the tension with like the Bahamut fight was I think like probably the most impactful of the icon fights. To back up a bit, I really love the Titan fight for the spectacle and honestly the music, because
Oh
the
yeah.
music in that is pretty much very reminiscent of like pretty much what Nobu Uematsu. Oh my god, I botched that so bad. Um, the composer initial for 14 and the guy who composed a lot of the earlier Final Fantasy soundtracks. He goes a lot more like rock with some like vocals for Titan's theme in 14, and Soken takes a lot of those cues for Titan's theme in 16, and I think it just adds to just the coolness of the fight. Like you get this epic rock theme going while you're like climbing up Titan's arm, dodging like boulders he's hurling at you. Like that shit I went crazy for. Like I thought that was incredibly fun. Um and it was just satisfying just to like finally kick Hugo's teeth in like once and for all. Like his first fight was pretty good too, in my opinion, and
Oh, I
that was
love this
definitely the
first
more
fight. Like whenever
yeah. So
he's in his human form, I love
mhm.
that.
Like that fight is definitely the more challenging, but damn if Titan's fight wasn't satisfying, and I swear to God my PS5 was gonna melt after that. Like it held in there, no frame drops or anything, but I was
It's doing
scared.
its best.
I
I remember
Because I
at
remember
one
fear
point.
reading
God in you.
online that like people's like PlayStation shut off during like some of these fights. Like
Uh,
Really? Like,
you got
oh my
some
God.
dusty ass PlayStations if that's the problem.
I think something's wrong with you guys. Like listen, I wouldn't say mine is like the like top of the line PlayStation. I mean, it's the same model of all of them, but like mine
Yeah,
was fine.
yeah.
Um,
It's like did you guys not use your PlayStation since it came out? Because like
Why do
I
you
even
like?
opened mine
Okay, you're
up to
saying
like
you guys.
yeah
Mhm.
like I opened up my PS5 to like put a new like solid state in for like more storage. There wasn't much dust at all in there, and I've like had it for a couple of years. So I don't know what the hell happened, but yeah, I'm glad it held in there. And then you get the Bahamut fight. You get the team up with Clive and Joshua versus Dion. The stakes are super high. Dion's kind of gone berserk because he just killed his father inadvertently. Like so much destruction going on. Great team up. The fight
Also,
was
I love
incredibly fun, and then the ending fucking got me because he cast Terra Flare, and I was like, holy shit! Because I'm pretty sure Terra Flare is what Bahamut cast to pretty much kill the world of 14 before they rebooted it. Because Bahamut's like the in-game reason that we even got like a Realm Reborn for 14, like overhaul 1.0, redo the game. So there's that. And then he cast fucking Zeta Flare. And I was like, my jaw actually fucking dropped. Like, this
that.
man is gonna blow up the whole fucking planet.
That is the moment when I was like, this is Dragon Ball, because he's like, here, I forget like all the names, but it was like Mega Flare, Giga Flare, Teta Flare, Zeta Flare. I'm like, what is this fucking Kaioken times a million bullshit Super Saiyan Blue? What?
It's
And they're
anime
like,
as hell, but goddamn, it's
and they
cool.
looked at each other and was like, it's gonna blow up the world. And I was like, it's gonna what?
The
We
writers are
gotta,
literally looking around and just like, is there anywhere like we can go further in the metric system? Like we can get bigger than this, right?
we gotta make up words to
The
get
blow
bigger
up the
units of
universe.
metric. Yeah. But last thing I'll say about Dion is another one of my favorite things is you don't learn why he's like berserk and doing all of this stuff until after you almost at the time you thought you killed him, but like you basically beat him down. And then you finally learn like why this, because during the entire fight you're like, this is awesome, this is amazing. Dion, why are you doing this? What is happening? Why are we fighting? And like even Joshua was like, you know, Your Highness, please stop. Please stop doing this. But he just doesn't.
Yeah, he's like
and
trying
it's-
to reason with them.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of a thing when people prime in this game, like when the dominants like prime, which aka take on like their icon forms, they can lose control of like their bodies. Especially for the characters that lost their power, like Benedicta and Hugo, that end up priming, is that they pretty much go berserk. They don't have any control over the icon anymore. And Dion kind of gets that just without losing his power at that
Yeah.
point. Like he's not in control of Bahamut anymore.
Yeah, I
How
can
do you
see that.
control fucking Bahamut?
Yeah.
I will say that like it is also just to put on more praise on my boy Dion. The fact that it took two icons, and or two dominants or icons. It's two icons because they're in that form.
Yeah.
The fact that it took two icons to take down my boy Dion shows how powerful that motherfucker was. Like it, and they had
Bro.
to they had to combine too. They had to
Yeah.
do combine, and they still
They
still
They didn't even know they
barely
could
won.
do that until that fight. They made some bullshit. They literally, you know what this is, Seth? You know what I just realized this is? This is like this is Dragon Ball, because this is just the Broly versus Goku and Vegeta fight. Because it starts with just one of them fighting and they get their ass handed to them. And the other fighting and they kind of get their ass handed to them. And they have to fight together. And even that's not enough. So like, fuck it, we gotta fucking fuse. And it's just Goku and Vegeta versus Broly. But but like in Final Fantasy world, that's all this is. Which again,
And you know what?
doesn't
Get to
make
the end where it's like Phoenix, Ifrit, and Bahamut taking on Ultima.
yeah.
That was also a really cool moment, I will say. Even though I don't give a shit about Ultima, that was cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
That was
Um,
good, man.
The spectacle of it was cool. I liked the fight. The story part, I couldn't really give two shits.
I would have
Yeah.
been okay with the game if like immediately after you take on like Dion, you fight what's that guy's name? The guy that's
Barnabas.
Odin. Barnabas. You fight like Barnabas is the actual last boss, and there is no like ultimate god. I'm sure he's like important in Final Fantasy lore, but I would have just been fine if they just like kept it with Barnabas, and like Barnabas is like the true last game, and you don't get his power until like New Game Plus.
Yeah, you climb up the tower, You get the big Virgil fight in the rain.
Yeah. And like that was
Yeah.
the final thing. Like cuz honestly, the best fight to me, as we've all pretty much agreed on, is Dion's fight. And the game could have ended there and I would have been happy. But like for story reasons,
the best icon fight. Yeah, I do agree with that.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I one thing I want to touch on with the Ultima, with the not just the Ultima's fight, but like just in general with these fights. And I just want to throw this out here just because Robert kind of suggested this, and I understand this is mostly personal preference, to be honest. Like, I understand for a lot of people, like, yeah, you fuck with this shit, and you know what? Good for you. You fuck with it. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of the icon fights. They, don't get me wrong, they look, and like, I like the Bahamut one, and I also like the Odin one, but that's mostly because the Odin one is barely an icon fight.
Yeah.
The reason why I don't vibe with them is I get they're great visual spectacle, but they're kind of mindless, and to me, I don't know, like, they kind of bore me personally. They look cool, don't get me wrong, and there a lot of work went into these animations. It's just, I don't know. I guess I didn't used to be like this, but over time I've become more gameplay driven. So whenever I get in a part where I know it's practically just a cutscene, I just don't vibe with it. And the best comparison I could think of is Asura's Wrath, which I haven't played, but I've heard that basically most of that game is just big, quick time cutscenes with over the top fucking shit happening. And I want to play that game eventually. I am interested, but like, I don't know. I think I'm gonna say this much. I understand that really, I don't think it's a legitimate criticism of the game for me to say this. It's just like that, like, oh, I don't like the icon fights. I'm gonna say it outright. It is just a matter of preference for me personally. Personally, I don't vibe with it, but obviously, I think I'm in the minority on this, so people shouldn't listen to me on it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll say about like the icon fight. Weirdly enough, one thing I really want to do, and I think I might do this as a fun little project, I really want to put Pizza Tower music over the fight against Titan. Whenever Clive is like running at it, like I want to put like, "You're ready to get funky." He just starts running at him.
Get this sweet music going.
Y'all ready to get funky? Honestly, what I need to do is I need to Photoshop Peppino's face onto Clive.
When this game comes out on PC, just get a mod where it's Clive's model, but then you just get a picture of Peppino taped to his forehead.
I'll take it.
Not even like, don't even replace his head, just like it's stapled to
Just
it.
tape it. Yeah.
I will say I am interested to see what the modding scene is going to look like for this game. That being said, I don't know if like the modding scene was that big for FF7 remake. That's the only other most recent Final Fantasy game on PC I can think of. But it'll be cool to see it.
There's always going to be model swaps for better and for worse.
Get Cloud, get Ultima replaced.
I think that'll be like the first mod, like the second it gets on. It's just like just immediately turn Clive into Cloud.
Yeah.
Every time Ultima comes on screen, you just hear One Winged Angel starts playing.
Hello there,
Listen, I don't know.
Cloud.
I'm really sad right now about what you did to Aerith.
Yeah.
So I wanna briefly touch upon this. So how do you feel about kind of how the game ended? Because obviously there's spoilers throughout this whole podcast, so might as well cover this. How do you think about how the game ended? I know there's one line in particular that you probably got a pretty good kick out of.
The power of friendship rules all.
No, it's definitely not that.
I don't actually. Wait, I'm actually not sure what.
So there's a part where when Clive is fighting Ultima, where he's about to land the finishing blow, and he's just like, I can't believe I'm saying this. Ultima like says something along the lines of like, the world you're fighting for is a fantasy, and he says, and then Clive says like, no, you're the one living in a fantasy, and I'm gonna make sure it's final. And I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah.
I literally, as soon as that scene happened, I paused. I texted Robert. It's like, hey, Clive really said that, huh? And he's like, yeah. It's like, is that just the thing that they do in Final Fantasy games? They just say the name of the game at the end.
I
It's like,
forgot to
nope.
I forgot to ask about that. I was like, this a is this something that like is in all of them and I just never know, like they cleverly find a way in, like how like there's a lot every game there's a character named Sid, like every game they somehow say Final Fantasy. Nope, this is the first time they've done that.
Yeah,
It's like, oh,
games always have like their staple characters. Like, oh, there's almost always some form of Sid.
Yeah, or yeah, Sid. I just said Clive. I meant Sid. Yeah, there's always Chocobo. There's some form of the summons. Like, I get that.
There's like always like most of the games also have like some form of like Biggs and Wedge. Like they gotta have their Star Wars reference.
I remember like I heard someone reference that line before, and I thought they were doing the Morbius meme, like it's Morbin time. I thought that's what they were doing. And
that's
like,
how I texted Robert that too. I was just like, wow, Clive really said it's Final Fantasy time, and he Final Fantasies all over him.
Yeah. Oh, it's up the quote. He's like, the only fantasy here is yours, and we shall be its final witness.
It's like, oh, great.
And it was like,
oh, time to roll the credits.
Bro, you guys know that meme where like it's like the dude writing on a piece of paper and like the pen's on fire, like the pen and paper are, like writing fire. It's like
Yoshi P is fucking ripping into that shit, just like.
It's from Sod writing Clive saying this will be your Final Fantasy.
It's like, damn, I'm so smart.
It's like, damn, I got that shit.
Yeah, I think the ending itself was fine. The final boss fight, I found pretty whelming. Like it was fine. It was cool. It had some cool stuff. Like, oh, it's cool. The Ultima uses like a lot of the abilities you've been using through the whole game. So it's like, oh, okay, just trying to. You're the one having to dodge this shit now.
This is your Final Fantasy, actually. I feel like, oh no.
It's like Ultima's like, I'm going to use Titan's ability, and Clive's like, no, I'm going to use Titan's ability.
Yeah. I'm gonna summon Chocobo Storm, and he's like, that's not the wrong game. No, that's 7.
It's like,
joke's on you, Clive.
Fat Chocobo.
Yeah.
Joke's on you, Clive. After this, I'm gonna go fuck Jill. No!
Clive's like, wait, I got Knights of the Round. It's over.
And Jill's like, well, I guess I'll let that happen. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Ultima's like, all right, we'll check out this. And he pulls out like Tifa's like slot machine. And then Ultima does like fucking the dolphin combo. He's like, what? Clive's like, what the fuck did you get? What the fuck was that? A dolphin? What the hell is that?
Like, Totsugeki!
Totsugeki! And then Gav just watching from a distance, like, what is happening?
What the bloody hell?
I love Guilty Gear.
I love Guilty Gear. I would love, honestly, what would have made that scene, like, I would have made that ending so tolerable, and it would have been the best thing in the world if right after, like, Gav just went to Clive and was like, hey man, I know a lot was happening, and there's probably a lot going through your mind. At what point did you say that this will be his Final Fantasy? And he's like,
shut up.
It's like I thought it sounded cool in the moment, and Gav's just like, it wasn't. Like,
that was actually really lame. I almost wish you would have let the world die so no one else.
Like, honestly, like I was team you.
Like, Joshua was just like, I'm glad I was dead, so I didn't have to hear that.
Yeah, like
no, like because of the post-credit scene, Josh was definitely alive. It's like, oh, Clive, I'm gonna make sure people definitely know you fucking said that shit.
He wrote a book after it.
Like Clive is like hugging everyone at the end, and then you just see like Joshua's body crawling forward. It's like, everyone, right before Clive killed Ultimate, he said this will be his final.
This really cringe shit.
He said this really cringe shit. He said, and then like Joshua passes away. It's like, Clive, what was he gonna say? He's like, I don't know. He's just talking crazy.
I said something really fucking cool.
I said something really cool. Yeah. I won't say it now though, because it's not the moment. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the ending itself was pretty bittersweet. Like, you know, all these characters going off to the finale, everyone kind of recognizes that, hey, this is basically a suicide mission at this point to fight Ultima. Like,
Yeah.
there's a very high chance that they're not coming back from this. So that's pretty bittersweet. Even after the finale, it's like you see like Clive washed up on the beach, him like kind of turning to dust or like to stone, like because this is what happens to bearers who use up too much magic, is that their bodies turn to stone and get like blighted. Because this is something going on in the world that we kind of just didn't touch on, was that there's like this
I
plague
assume if you're
going.
watching the 16 cast, you kind of know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like everyone like gets blighted and dies, and then you kind of
If you-
see Clive.
You don't
start
think
to
someone
turn
would
to stone
stay
too.
like an hour 50 into this podcast and just be like, yeah, I'm still on the fence about this game?
Yeah. I think if you're on the fence about this game, you wouldn't watch this far in anyway, because we
Yeah.
spent a whole lot of shit.
He's like, I'm an hour 50 in this podcast, but maybe the next couple of minutes will really change my opinion about this the game.
Yeah. So, no, I think this guy talked about how Clive's going to be railing Jill. This is really
It's really
gonna
made me
get-
second
We're
guess.
actually in there. I gotta get this right now.
I got to get in there.
I gotta get-
But,
It's like Square's like, fuck. It's like, hey, Square, if you're listening, lean in close real quick. Square, look, man, you'll make like another 500,000 sales. So you just put in a scene of Clive just railing the shit out of jail. Just put it in the game.
Hey,
bro.
Square.
Sure.
Hey, Square.
all
While
over
you're
the
here,
Italians.
you'll also get a lot more sales, but a completely different audience if you put one of those scenes with Dion and whatever his boyfriend's name was.
Just put both those
Terrence.
scenes in.
Terrence. Yeah,
You
just
will get
honestly
both
once. It did wonders for Game of Thrones.
But
And also, like, give Joshua one of those with like his henchwoman. Just turn the game into like an orgy. It's fine.
yeah. So like the ending kind of leaves things sort of up to interpretation. Like it's a pretty open-ended ending for what it's worth. So like there's a few different ways you can kind of take it, just depending on like basically how you want to interpret the events, which I think is pretty cool, honestly. It's like, hey, this could be like, is this like a story that Joshua, or like, is this all fiction, or is this like a journal of events that actually happened? Like, you're not fully sure, so it's kind of cool that it kind of lets you decide like what this really was in the end.
Maybe the Final Fantasy were the friends we made along the way.
I mean,
I
that's
knew you were gonna
literally
say
what.
that.
I mean, unironically, yes, that's what the game story ends up being.
Yeah. It's like it turns into like, oh, this is a storybook called Final Fantasy by Joshua Rossfield.
I like that. I really like the concept of this ending. Although I have like issues with where the story went, I do like the idea of like some great event happening, this like world-changing thing, and then so much time has passed that basically whatever happened there has now been like turned into myth, where it's not even sure a lot of people even like believe in it anymore. Not to mention like the openness of it, where I personally believe Clive is dead. He's deader than Disco. But I can actually see arguments to the contrary, in my opinion, where it's like, yeah, I could see that, like, how some people can interpret it that like Clive somehow survived this bullshit. So like, I really like the openness of it. And plus also like, I feel like it ties very well into the running theme of this game, which is about like, I think the running theme of this game is it's about fighting for a future that you will never see. You know, because like Ultima, I won't lie. I know I didn't like Ultima really at all. I will congratulate him on the sentiment he gives at the very end when he dies. He's like, congratulations, you get to live now in your dying world, fuckhead. Like basically, it's like a final fuck you. It's like so petty.
This is your Final Fantasy, bitch.
Yeah.
It's like, joke's on you. Here's your Final Fantasy, fuckhead.
And it's just like, and Clive's just like, ooh, it does not sound as cool when you said. Maybe it wasn't as cool when I said it.
He's like, and then Clive's like, well, I guess I should just kill myself by blowing up this crystal now.
Clive realized he said something cringe, so he killed himself. That's how my interpretation of events.
Honestly, that's pretty relatable, man. But
Yeah, it's like I like the theme of that, like fighting for something that you may not live to see. because like that's even like Sid's motive, like the
Yeah.
hideaway, is that it's basically is like this is a place where people can come and like die peacefully. Like, hey, your life kind of sucks starting out, but maybe it won't end so bad. But then Clive's kind of use for the hideaway is like, I want people to come here so they can have a new start, a new beginning. It's like the ways that they kind of interpret having the hideaway really does kind of reinforce some of like the game's themes there.
I do agree with that, and like I think it works. So I think that's like one of the themes that works really well here, especially since yeah, like you said, it's building off of Sid. I think just to dig into it, yes, this game has a very environmental message. One of the funny things is like I believe that yes, the blight, the crystals, these are all analogies for climate change.
Oh,
Um,
a
one of
Final
the
Fantasy
funniest
game with
moments.
climate issues? What are you talking about? That
Oh,
never
never.
happens. Yeah, no,
Uh,
never
Ever
happens.
but
Midgar? I don't.
but I think the funniest moment where it almost felt like the game is looking at the camera, where Jill basically says to Sid once they learn about the quest to kill the crystals, and it's just like, so you're telling me that the people in power knows about like the crystals being actually bad for the land, but they decide to do nothing about off of it. They decide to do nothing about it because they just profit off it purely for their own personal gain. It's like, yeah, isn't that crazy? I swear they look at the fucking camera. It's like, oh shit.
Stares
Look,
intently at the camera for like 5 seconds.
I wasn't joking when I said at one point, no, they just become eco-terrorist. They become eco-terrorist.
They definitely do. But like, I like that because like that's kind of a major theme. It's understanding that like yes, things will get worse, but there's the by taking action, by doing something about it, we're building for a better future. Even if we necessarily don't get to live for it, live to see it, it shouldn't matter because it's not about us. It's about the future. It's about the next generation. And I like that. I really do find that that's a good theme. I, as much as I had the issues with like a lot of the characters and stuff like that, I do like that theme that they settled with. And from what it sounds like, that seems to be a theme in a lot of other Final Fantasy games as well.
Mhm. But yeah, that's pretty much the story thoughts all over the place. So to kind of wrap things up, what's like your guys' kind of closing thoughts about the game? Like overall, you think it was a good game, great game, best in the series, best ever made?
It's the best, it's the best in my opinion. No, I'm joking. Uh, I like the game. I think it's good. Um, I think ultimately though, like its biggest issue will still always be like it wants to be an action game and a Final Fantasy game, but it doesn't commit enough to either of them. If it wanted to be a full action game, it should take out a lot of the RPG elements. It should fix its pacing because that's the other big issue with this game. Lower its runtime and like take out a lot like the side quest stuff and just kind of like fully commit to being an action game instead of like this kind of action game that's still very Final Fantasy, because I feel like the two don't work well together at all times, and that's kind of like its biggest issue. Seth, were you about to say something?
Oh, I wanted to add on to your point too. Like, I feel like there is still like an avenue of like where you can be actiony but still find some way to do RPG elements, but it would be tough and you would have to dig deeper. When me and Robert were talking about the combat in this game, one of the things we thought was weird is how the game keeps telling you that when you switch icons, your magic ability changes the element, but elemental damage doesn't really seem to matter at all in this game.
Doesn't exist.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
there is a good point.
something
It's not like ice does more or less to like fire enemies or something like that. Yeah.
like no joke, like when I first fought those like bomb dudes, I stopped using my fire abilities on reflex just because like, oh, they're fire enemies, that means they're going to be resistant to my phoenix powers, right? No, that's a
Yeah.
load of
Yeah.
horse shit. And I feel like they need to go a little further with it with the DMC style combat. Give the dude some delay combos, man. I'm telling you, give him some delay combos. But also like maybe do something where enemies will have specific weaknesses to certain like elements. So you can basically be like, oh, I can hit him with the wind element, or maybe you can do something where you combine things where I hit them with a Phoenix ability to light them on fire, and then I follow it with a Garuda ability with the wind to like make it increase damage or some shit. Maybe I freeze them. Maybe I freeze them with Snap Freeze and follow with the Earth ability to smash them. You know, like something along those lines. I think would have helped. Like would have give you more reason to switch around with icon abilities and stuff like that. Um, and you know, I know I'm just playing as armchair developer here. I'm not saying like, oh, it would have been so easy, but like I think these are ideas that maybe Square Enix should consider if this is the route they do want to go down. Is like, don't as you put it, Drew, it's like you need to find like a strong identity. Don't lose your sense of identity. I would hate to see Final Fantasy, even though I only played this one game here, I would hate this game to go forward and just further lose its own sense of identity.
Yeah.
This
I
is
will
a
say
this
that
is a
like
thing with to go off Seth. They said this is something that the series, like the main series, does is that each game kind of iterates on previous or tries new things out. Um, Very rarely would I say the mainline games like take direct like inspiration from the previous one. Like they're always trying something new to like vary up the formula, be it new mechanics for the turn-based games or like going from like 13 to like 15 in terms of the single player games, like going from like this turn-based to like the action RPG style. It's like they're always trying new things with these games. So I wonder if we're going to keep seeing more of this action formula because that tends to perform better with modern audiences, or if they want to kind of take things a little more traditional. Because like the medieval setting in itself is already kind of harkening back to the traditional Final Fantasy, because everything up to Final Fantasy VII was pretty traditional fantasy. So I'm wondering kind of what's the next step after this, you know?
I th- I will say that like, and I feel like a lot of my things have been like, I don't know, I would go back and forth, but like I will say it's still a good game. I think the icon fights, and like Seth, I think the icon fights are great. I think they're cool set pieces, and they lead to moments where like they are cool in like the story, especially with like Dion, and those characters. So it has very like I said at the beginning, it has very high like highs, and that's great. And I think especially at the beginning, the action and combat, at least from perspective, it looks fun, and that messing around with different powers is a great idea. And gaining these like summon abilities is, you know, interesting and gives you a sense of like I want to keep going, like almost like a Mega Man level. Like I want to keep gaining new abilities and fighting the next icon. But that all said, it does have moments where it does lag. It's just like some characters just don't hit, and it just really drags on a lot. We didn't get into it, but like there are some side quests that are like genuinely very interesting and really engaging. But then there's, you know, for as many side missions are as like the boy and the father that's mistreating the bearers, so you feed them to the
Oh my God.
wolves.
That one was awful.
That one was that was super like
It's
interesting,
fucked
but
up.
also very dark. There's as many of those as there's like you need to help this blacksmith find the right materials for his sword so he can make a really interesting knife. And I'm just like,
Oh God, yeah.
I just like why does this one have so many talking points? So it's just like it's very up and down. But I will still say like I would like to see, you know, the series actually continue some of the trends. I think it's a good idea to keep like the action things going, but like Seth mentioned, you do kind of have to, well, I guess Seth mentioned off something I said, but like you have to commit to one of the ideas or the other. Like you're kind of doing half and half, but you do kind of have to either increase the RPG elements and make it and do that, or increase the action elements. Like it's kind of when you do
Or
this
better
half and
yet,
half system, both just kind of fall flat. So
or better
still
yet,
enjoyable
gotta
game, and I
yeah.
like to see like when a longtime series tries something new and different. It definitely worked because this game, I'm pretty sure, sold really well compared to most Final Fantasy, and
Yeah.
did appeal to Western audiences like us.
It did really good
Yeah.
sales wise. It definitely was hampered by the fact that it was only on PS5 and
One sec.
it's not coming to PC till next year, I
I didn't get
believe.
that.
They haven't
Could
like
you try
confirmed a
again?
release date, but we do know that there is a PC version in the works. So that might help the sales as well.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
But
And then I kind of want to like jump in also, like when Drew said you either commit to one or the other. I agree with that. Or, and I mean, this is the harder part too. You got to figure out ways, like if you want this to be a action game RPG hybrid, you got to figure out a way to bring those elements in harmony with each other. Um, I think, and that's one of those things where it's easier said than done. But I feel like I definitely think there's a vision of this game that can be that. Weirdly, I think it's FF7 remake, based on what I've been told, actually kind of gets it right. Um, I don't know. I'll have to play it for myself. But yeah, continue, Robert.
yeah. Um, so I think this is definitely a step in the right direction for the action combat. 15 definitely felt more of a hack and slash, though the elemental effects really did matter more, because like magic you had to craft and you only got so many casts out of, but magic felt a lot more impactful in 15. So maybe having a magic system that matters a little more outside of just visual flair would help a lot, and kind of honing more into like, okay, do we want to make this more of an RPG or do we want to make this more Devil May Cry? Because the mix is fine, but it feels lacking because there's not enough of either to really satisfy people in the long term. Um, but kind of my thoughts is on the game overall. I think it's a really good game. I think it's designed really well. It's pretty polished. I've only ran into maybe one bug, if that, and that was just kind of a visual thing. Like, oh, Clive didn't do a stepping up animation on like this one set of rocks. Like that was like the only like polished thing I really noticed outside of performance. Um, I think the narrative itself is fine. It definitely has its ups and downs, like we've kind of talked about this whole podcast. So like, yeah, it starts off really strong, but then you're gonna have moments when you're tuning in and out, kind of just depending on what's going on or what you're like personally like attached to. I think soundtrack's really good. Some tracks definitely stand out more than others. Like the ones that I really remember are like Titan's theme and like Clive's like icon theme, Find the Flame. That one's a really good track. But a lot of the other stuff, like it's good music, but it kind of blends. But that's honestly kind of a talking point for a lot of like these realistic looking games where if you have like songs that stand out like old RPG music, it's not going to fit very well. Like, yeah, I remember a lot more of like the area themes from like Final Fantasy VII, but having themes like that in 16 are kind of going to take you more out of the experience than more like subtle like environmental pieces. Um, so gameplay, so it could be a little deeper, but for what we got, it's still a fun game. There's still things to kind of try out and experiment with. If you kind of want more of your action game fix, you can also do a level replay where you can kind of scale your equipment down to have a little more of like an even challenge, though that could also turn into just enemies being more spongy than anything. But that stuff's fine. Um, if I I don't think this is one of the best Final Fantasy games. A lot of people are saying like, "Oh, this is like one of the best Final Fantasy games ever made." I really kind of disagree with that. That's I think I have a lot of with a lot of the games in the series that I talked to Seth about a little bit, was that I have like my personal favorites, but I always have like an asterisk. Like I love Final Fantasy X, but you can't skip cutscenes and all that. And kind of the conversation we had from that was that, that's going to be basically every game you play. Like you're going to have things you don't like about these, and it's kind of whether it's up to the individual whether how much of that would be a breaking point for them. Because some people might not be bothered by things and others. Like, oh, I love Final Fantasy IX. I think it has one of the best stories, but the gameplay also gets very slow. Like it just takes forever to get your turn. Stuff like that. but I definitely think that this is a good Final Fantasy game. Definitely one that someone that's new to the series, I would say to try out. If anything, try the demo and see if the beginning really like kind of gets you interested. But as for where to go like after, if you like want to play any of the other games after, that's kind of just up to you. Like what it depends what you're looking for in a game because the great thing about Final Fantasy is that there's going to be that one game for somebody. Like there's 16 mainline entries and they each do something different. So there's going to be one game for anybody, I think, if they're at all interested in like RPGs. But 16, if I had to give it like a rating, I would give it somewhere between a 7 and an 8 out of 10. Like it's good, it has really great moments, but there's some things that kind of prevent me from saying, "Oh, this is like best game, this is a masterpiece." No, it's great, but not like fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, Robert, I feel that thoroughly. Is this the part where I get to jump in?
Yes.
All right, cool. Um, I mean, you guys basically hit the nail on the head on everything that I was going to say. I agree. I think this is a great, well, hmm. I think this is a great game with a lot of ups and downs. It's a very, at times it could be a very inconsistent experience. Um, but I, I really think like if there's one good thing I can say about this for sure, which there's actually a lot of good things I can say about Final Fantasy 16, it makes me more interested in trying out the other Final Fantasy games. Even though I wasn't particularly in love with 16, it has piqued my interest where it's like I see the little bits and pieces of like the atmosphere, the art design, the music, all these things that almost come together but not quite here. Maybe if I explore other Final Fantasy games, I'll find it. And I think because I played this game now, I feel more open to the idea of playing other Final Fantasy titles. So that's a very, you know, I guess my ringing endorsement of FF16 is it's a good gateway drug to Final Fantasy games.
Hmm.
And I think my biggest issue is just for the developers on this is the biggest problem for me with this game is it felt like it was constantly pulling in multiple directions like we've all mentioned in terms of its story, in terms of its tone, in terms of its gameplay. And it feels, I hate to put it this way, but it feels like a very AAA type game where it's like it's got to be a big single player game. It's got to have all these epic cutscenes, and there's going to be side quests. It's not going to matter if the side quests are actually good or not. We just got to have them in there because it's a big AAA game. It's reminding me a lot of the trend of like Sony exclusives, for example, which I guess yeah, this is a Sony exclusive right now. Is like your Last of Us is your God of Wars where it's like these semi-open world third person action heavy story shit, and I know I've kind of it sounds like I hate on Sony a lot, and it's not that. I do enjoy these games to a degree. I think there's a lot of really good Sony games out there. My issue is I'm afraid that this particular type and genre of game is kind of becoming what biographical movies are for the Oscars, where it's just like we make a biopic, it's gonna get an Oscar, it's gonna get Best Picture. Doesn't matter if it's Bohemian Rhapsody and it's mid as shit, it will win an Oscar. Um, and I don't want to see games go in this direction where everyone is trying to ape this because that's what gets all the critics raving or something along those lines. Um, I I want Final Fantasy to stay weird. Uh, if anything, I want them to try to strive to find their own identity in their future titles. And it sounds like a lot of their older games already do that. But I'm sorry, that was like a weird tirade there. I hope some part of that makes sense.
But yeah, I think that's about it for Final Fantasy 16. However, since it's the Fresh podcast, we got to end it with our fresh picks. So Drew, you got anything fresh? Got anything rotten?
do have something very fresh to talk about. And that is a little horror movie that came out recently called Talk to Me. And it's a A24 film. And I remember at first when I saw trailers and stuff, I thought like, okay, I'll probably see it because I like horror movies. But I don't expect much from it. It just kind of looks like standard stuff, demon, ghost, whatever. But one of my coworkers actually saw it for me, and he came into work the next day. And he's like, "Dude, you need to watch this movie." And I was like, "Really? It's that good?" And he's like, "You need to watch this movie." And he's like, "I don't want to talk about anything else. Just go watch the movie." And so I was like, okay, with a recommendation like that, well, shit. So I went and I watched the movie, and now I'm gonna tell you guys need to watch. If you're into horror movies, you need to watch this movie. It's really good. It's incredibly well written. It has a great cast, and there's a lot of like twists and turns that I just was not expecting with it, and it's like very clever what they do, like with. Because there's rules to this ghost and with this demon, and they do like a very good job of like explaining these rules and like messing around with it. So I'll just say like I was very pleasantly surprised to realize that like Talk to Me is like as good as it is. And it's wild because like I don't know if it's even in theaters anymore, because unfortunately it came out around a time when it was Barbie and Oppenheimer and TMNT, and it's just like a lot of great movies are coming out right now. And it's just like this tail end of the summer. And I completely skipped Mission Impossible, which is the best Mission Impossible so far. And it's just like, it's unfortunate, but like this is also a really good horror movie. But unfortunately, and thing with a lot of horror movies, it probably won't make that much of a budget off of this. But it's super interesting and like a really cool like just a really cool movie. I don't want to talk too much about it because it's just one of those things like just go watch it and talk about it after the fact, because there's a lot of cool twists and turns in it. So yeah, Talk to Me. It might still be out in theaters. I don't know. When I went to see it, there was only like one showing per day in the theater that's near me, so it might be gone by now.
It's funny you mention that because I actually remember reading a review from weirdly a local news outlet that talked about it, that gave it some praise. And one thing that they kind of said is like, and I believe this is an A24 film, which if you've seen an A24 movie, you know that they're very kind of like these very visceral, kind of cerebral experiences. They very much are. They're not your typical brand of horror films. Not saying all A24 films are horror films, just it's kind of how they are,
They're good at doing horror films.
Especially horror films, yeah. But what I've heard is like this game does have a little bit, but it's not quite your typical A24, which is weirdly enough all about being untypical, So I've heard that like this movie is not it does a lot of I guess based on what I read, it does a lot of things that you wouldn't quite expect a movie like this to go for.
It's not like I know what you're trying to get at. A lot of A24 movies are what I describe as acid trips. It's not that. It's not. What was that one that I also saw? It sucks. It was actually decent. It was the one where like if you die, you can, or if you get arrested, you can pay money to make a clone of you, and it gets murdered. Is like the premise of this other one. And that one is just a straight acid trip, just like a straight what the fuck is happening. Like you won't understand it until you watch a game journal about it later. Like, no, this one, it's a bit easier to understand. But that doesn't mean it's like any less good. It's it's more digestible for a common audience. It's still like, I say that, it's still very violent and very like graphic as well, so we just compared to most A24 films, it's more digestible, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, I guess that's what they're saying is like it's weird because
I say that, but I feel like people are gonna watch it and be like, "That's digestible." I'm like, comparatively,
it's weird because like what makes this movie unique compared to other A24 films is it's not as weird as other A24 films.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't feel like an acid trip. You can tell what's going on. There's
Yeah.
there is one scene though where you're just like, and there it is, but it's quick. It's very quick.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but
that's a
that's
very interesting pick.
yeah, but
I,
that is my pick.
it's just funny because I happen to just know what it was actually, even though I agree. I swear this movie came out with no marketing. All I saw about it was just reading that review. And it wasn't like through an IGN or anything. It was literally like a local news outlet talking about it. It's like weird. I'd never heard of this movie.
I saw a few trailers for it like way back before, but again, it just got swept under the rug because unfortunately, the freaking Mission Boppenheimer TMNT train just destroyed it, and I feel really bad for it, but it's good. It is a really good movie. So yeah, that's my
Seth,
pick.
Yeah. So Seth, what about you?
I got a pretty, I'd say, good fresh pick, and I think it's one that like is gonna resonate with us a lot. It just depends on your access to it. I've been playing Ultra Kill. I know Robert has heard of Ultra Kill.
It's
Drew,
on
have
the
you
Steam
heard of?
library.
Sounds very familiar.
It's about a GoPro going to hell and killing demons. Does that ring a bell with you at all?
Is this the one where like oh, what's his name? The guy that does Wolverine and also is this the one where Steve Bloom is like voicing the main character? Like it's like he's like a skeleton or something.
No.
What am I thinking of? I don't know what I'm thinking of. Then no, I don't know.
So, it's funny because like there is a notable voice actor. It's Gianni Montegrino, but he's mostly notable for being like a really big shit poster. And funny enough, he has a really good Steve Bloom like impression. But no, he doesn't play a skeleton here. Okay, I'll just sell you on this idea. Drew, Ultra Kill is Devil May Cry meets Doom. And that's not me being just like a typical IGN reviewer saying that shit. That is part of the marketing of this game. Is like the name of the website you can go to buy this other than Steam is Devil May Quake. But basically the premise of this is like, yeah, it's a first person shooter. It's much like a Doom and like these older like kind of boomer shooter style stuff where like newer Doom, where it's all about fast aggression, getting in your enemy's face to heal. For Doom, it was about doing these executions on your enemies. For this game, it's about when you do damage to an enemy or you kill them, they get blood on you and that heals you. That is the only way you can heal. The game literally starts with these three lines. It's mankind is dead, blood is fuel, hell is full. And it's just like that's all you get. There you go.
Hell is full.
It promotes aggression, but at the same time, much like Devil May Cry, you get like a style meter next to it, and it's doing these read out of all these moves. So it's like, sure, you can shoot a dude or do a headshot, but what if you got a collateral? What if you got a multi-kill? What if you did a butt slam? So you knocked them up in the air and shot them with a rocket and blew a bunch of them apart. Like it's all these like kind of cool little moves. One of the best weapons in this game is a revolver, and each weapon has a different variation. So the variation of the revolver called the marksman allows you to flip coins, and when you shoot the coin, it will automatically target the nearest enemy's weak point and do extra damage. The more coins that your shot ricochets off of, and you could throw 4 at a time, the more damage it's gonna do. And it seems tough, but once you get to know how to shoot it, it actually basically becomes like an aimbot for you, where you're just like, I don't even look at the enemies. I'm just shooting this coin to kill them for me. It's fucking cool. And at the same time, the game has a style meter, and each weapon has Drew, you'll like this also. Mm-hmm. It has a fresh weapon meter.
Is that actually what it's called?
It's called the fresh. I don't know if it's called weapon meter, but it's basically called like fresh meter. And then it gets like, standard, and then stale, and then dull. Like
bro,
you use the same weapon over and over.
Bro, why would we need to sue these people? Why would I like this? What are you talking?
but it's cool. I actually really like it. It almost makes me wish like Devil May Cry and like other character action games that have a style meter had this, where it was a little meter that tells you like, all right, you're doing this weapon, you're doing this thing too much, you need to switch it out. Even though if I probably had a brain and just looked over, it's like, oh, my style meter's not going up as much, I'd probably know it. But it's cool. I like it. The amount of like switching you can do. I also I love like there's so much you can praise about it. The combat is really good. The music is really good. The story, when you do decide to get into it, has very interesting lore since it's all based on Dante's Divine Comedy, but with like definitely some twists in there.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating game. Um, one of my favorite moments is like whenever I learned that I could ride the rocket. Like I can jump on my own rocket and shoot it out. And I was like, I fought like this massive boss while riding on a rocket, just shooting coins in the air. Like it felt like the most adrenaline pumping thing I've ever had in a video game. I was like, this is fucking insanity. Like none of this shit makes sense, but it's awesome. Um, I just love it so much. And it's in early access right now. It's not done, but it's had years of updates. There's supposed to be 3 acts. 2 acts are now out and fully completed. The guy's still working on it. We have no idea when he's going to get this third act, but it's great. Honestly, there's enough content here with just those 2 acts alone that you're going to have a great time with just that. Not to mention, its version of the Bloody Palace it's awesome. It's called the Cyber Grind, where basically it's limitless waves, and you are just on this like constantly reforming platform with more and more waves of enemies. And it's kind of like what I like at it's kind of what I almost want at a DMC is you just keep fighting nonstop until you drop. Like that's it. That's what the Cyber Grind is. So yeah, like I'd say Ultra Kill is definitely worth your time. It's so much fun. It actually works pretty well on the deck thanks to aim assist. You might want to tinker with some of the controls though, because the dash button is bound to the left thumbstick, and there are some bosses that are gonna be on your ass, and I promise you, you will get like cramps in your thumb from the amount of times you're gonna be mashing it.
Speedrun carpal tunnel. Here you go.
Yeah, I definitely recommend finding some ways to rebind the controls. At this point, I'm just used to it. It's Stockholm syndrome. But yeah, Ultra Kill, fantastic game. I'm really looking forward to the full release. There's a good chance that it's probably going to be ending up one of my favorite games of all time once it has that full release.
Hmm. All right.
All right. So to round things off, my fresh pick for this week is a little game called A Short Hike. It's something that's been out for years and just recently got put on Xbox Game Pass. Please sponsor us. And
Good,
it's
good. I'm
like
glad,
as
even
the
though I'm not the host, we're still begging for sponsorships.
I'll take over it this week.
Yeah.
I'll wave the banner and go, please. But no, A Short Hike is like the title suggests, a short hike. It's a nice little open adventure game. It takes place on a little island. You're going on a trip just to kind of get away from the city and stuff for a bit. Um, and basically the goal is, to climb this mountain. And along the way, as you follow like the trails and stuff, you get to meet like these kind of quirky characters and help them out with their little problems. Like one of the characters who like gives you like a shovel, you need to trade him for a smaller shovel so he can start making little sand castles, and he eventually makes this whole like sand castle empire. And he starts like, all right, so I built this. Now I want to run for mayor. Oh, I lost the mayor. That's okay. Now I'm going to run for like prime minister or something. Like this little kid comes up with like this whole elaborate government system that you wouldn't expect him to do. Or like for the game's like climbing tutorial, one of the characters is like, "Hey, you're not just joining like this small climbing club. This club has like hundreds of members all across the globe." It's like, "How many members do you have here?" "2, but that's okay. There's characters everywhere." And then you run into them later, and that guy who's like thinks he's like hot shit climbing the rock wall. he's like kind of stuck climbing the mountain. He's like, I don't know if I can go any further, and his friend's like, Yo, you could do it. Like little interactions like that are just they're cute and it's a cozy game. Like that's kind of what it is. It's a nice little cozy time. You get you get off Ultra Kill. You've had your fun like mowing demons down in Double May Doom, and now you just want to climb a mountain, chill out to some nice music. So yeah, it's a fun time. If you just want to like follow the main path and just get to the top, it won't take very long, maybe like an hour and a half at most. But if you want to do like everything, then it's about a 4 or 5 hour game. It's something that you can chill with like a nice like afternoon with. So definitely would recommend checking it out. It's been on like itch.io bundles before. Like I remember I got one of the itch.io like support bundles for one of the charity relief ones a few years ago. Um, it was on one of theirs, but it's a game that goes on sale quite a bit too, and like I said, it's on Game Pass, so definitely check it out.
Cool.
Yep.
I have it downloaded as well. I just even before this, I had it. It's just I heard a short hike before. I heard it's short, so yeah, I give it a download.
Yeah. So it's definitely something to help kind of play if you're just kind of feeling overwhelmed with things and you just kind of need like a nice little calm distraction just to kind of get away from stuff for a bit. It definitely does that job pretty well. Um, Definitely has like that kind of healing effect, I guess, to it. Like, you know, appreciate the little things every now and again, you know. But yeah, with that, I would like to thank you guys for coming out and talking video games, Final Fantasy, and other stuff with me.
It's a
It was a
pleasure. It's my line, bitch.
I don't know, dude. I don't know what my lines are supposed to be. I'm normally saying Robert's lines.
Drew's just I'm Drew.
Present.
Yeah. All right, and with that, I'm gonna end things off here. So thank you all for listening in, and have a good one.
Stay safe out there. Bye.